Mr. Chairman, the live stream has now been started.
Thank you very much. So welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet. The location is slightly different, a little bit more cramped than usual, so my apologies for that. But we started in the Shire Hall, we've now ended up in Plough Lane with a smaller room. In addition to Cabinet members and other councillors present in the room, we also have some councillors joining our meeting remotely, and I will now check that they can hear us and we them. Cabinet members joining remotely, Councillor Tyler.
Yes, good afternoon, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Any Cabinet support members? Councillor Jinman.
Just joining, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Jinman, are you able to hear and see us? Thank you. I think we'll continue at the moment, and if you're to be involved, then we can involve you. So group leaders and their representatives and scrutiny chairs, Councillor Terry James is here in the room with us. Thank you. Councillor Lester is remote. Can you hear and see us, Jonathan?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I can see and hear you clearly.
Thank you. Councillor Matthews is present in the room. Councillor Fagan.
Good afternoon, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilding.
Good afternoon. I can see and hear. Thanks.
Very much. Councillor Howell sends his apologies. Councillor Swinglehurst.
She is, excuse me, she is joining me, but she's just slightly delayed.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Stark sends his apologies. Councillor Baldson. And Councillor Milne, who is a ward member with particular reference to Hereford City item. So Councillor Milne, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Leader.
We have a number of officers attending who will be introduced as they are called upon. I will now formally open the meeting. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and making a recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted when you're not speaking. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. As we move through the agenda, in addition to discussion by Cabinet members, I will invite group leaders or their representatives, where appropriate, to provide views and questions from their group on each item. Where appropriate, I will call upon scrutiny chairpersons to comment on behalf of their committee. Voting will be undertaken by a show of hands in the room. Only Cabinet members physically present in the room may vote. So the first item is apologies for absence. We have those from Councillors Howells and Stark. Do we have any other apologies?
I've not received any additional apologies, Leader.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interest for items on the agenda today? I see none, thank you. Third item is minutes of the last meeting. To approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on 23rd of February. These were published rather late, but in the supplement to the agenda pack. Cabinet members, are you content that the minutes are an accurate record? Please, show of hands, thank you. Councillor Crockett, you were absent, I think, weren't you? Item 4, to receive any questions from members of the public. We have received 4 questions from members of the public for this meeting, and the response to each has been published as a supplement to the agenda papers. Those members of the public who have submitted questions have the opportunity to submit a written supplementary or to join the meeting to ask their question live. Supplemental questions are to be no more than 1 minute in length and must include a question. I will exercise some leniency, but if I ask a questioner to stop speaking, they must comply with my request, please. I will now ask the clerk to confirm if a supplemental question is to be asked for each of the questions. First questioner is Helen Hamilton. Do we have a supplemental question from Ms. Hamilton?
We have a written supplementary, so I'll share that on screen and read it. Her supplementary question is, in response to my questions how the Commission proposals would fit within the diffuse water pollution plan DEFRA is legally bound to produce, the Council quotes a single line from a 31-page document as Natural England's view on the proposals and says that it will discuss the plans with the agencies, indicating it has not done so yet. The Natural England document dates from 2015 before either the WWF Fish Legal or the Dutch nitrogen judgments, and is now unlikely to be compliant with any duties under the Habitats regulations. Why should Herefordshire Council devote funds to work that DEFRA must carry out as soon as reasonably practicable, and which it is not certain will be accepted as part of the DWP? In responding to this question, please be aware that the courts have said in both the Fish Legal case and Harris v Environmental Agency that the shortage of resources is not a justification for failing to produce DWP or meet the requirements of the Habitats directives.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank Ms Hamilton for her supplementary question. And I'd like to provide assurance that we will be continuing our ongoing discussions with the agencies about the work of the Commission, which predate your questions. We've accepted an offer from them to discuss next steps following Cabinet's consideration of this report today. As your questions also raise legal considerations, we will take further advice. We will respond to the points you raise once we have the benefit of this advice and have discussed further with our partner agencies, which I anticipate that, because of diary commitments, will be towards the end of March.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. The next question from Mark Franklin. Do we have a supplemental question?
He does, Leader. Again, it's a written supplementary. He says, many thanks to the Cabinet Member for a most detailed and informative response. The 7% figure has been much quoted, but excludes those whose necessary journeys begin in the city and end outside, or vice versa, and those whose journeys begin and end within the city but must use personal mode of transport. Thus, a group much larger than the 7% may experience considerable delays in crossing the city, particularly at peak time. What reduction in journey time might they expect following completion of the ERIC?
Okay, Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Leader. Just trying to work the question out. Yes, the 7% figure is traffic that's technically bypassing Hereford. So it's trying to go from Shrewsbury to, let's say, the Ross Spur. So in relation to the other traffic, 40% of the traffic that doesn't leave the city boundaries, and the roundabout, as I said in response, just over 50-something% goes in and out of the city. So what the journey time applies to everyone is the straight answer, having kind of absorbed that question. Yeah, but the journey time reduction that I quoted for Eric, which is 14%, well, not journey time reduction, it was removal. I think he actually asked the removal of traffic. That's a slightly different question, and I can get some detail on that. But there's a 14% reduction in traffic flows, 23% reduction in congestion, and the question he answers is journey time, so I'll provide that ASAP. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrington. Councillor Davies has just joined us, so welcome. The next questioner is Philip Price. Present. Mr. Price, do you wish to ask a supplemental?
Thank you, Chairman. I ask this question on behalf of my farming colleagues, as they are under a lot of stress at the present moment from all sorts of things, including phosphate and using the catchment. I have specific interests and reasons for wanting a clean and healthy River Wye. After at least 9 years and hundreds of thousands of pounds spent, all the experts, specialists, consultants and academics across 2 countries conclude that as of last week, we don't have enough evidence, measures that have been and are being taken or required on the levels and movements of P, both legacy and present, to drive community engagement and enact change. It is an insult to the farming community who are making strides to resolve phosphate leach for you to regularly state that farming is the cause of 70% of the problem and only 30% of human waste. When there are such gaps in knowledge of how phosphate moves, your admission does not support this spurious claim. Will the Cabinet address this statement and deal with the issue of human waste entering the catchment from every public sewer in the River Wye catchment?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Price. Councillor Harvey?
Yes, well, government has made a number of statements recently about the action that it's wanting to take to regulate the release of sewage into river systems by water treatment works by the water companies. And DEFRA is about to consult shortly on proposals to hypothecate the fines that they are capable of issuing to water companies in order to provide a funding source to assist with river cleanup. That's all government activity, and as a council, we're implementing mitigation measures against phosphate pollution from water treatment works through things like the recently implemented wetland at Luston and wetlands that are planned in the pipeline at Titley and at Tarrington, and hopefully in other places in the county as well. But we don't have the ability to deal with the water companies ourselves. I will investigate what options are open to us under that open to us, and will provide a full written response to you, Mr. Price.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The last question is from Ms. Reid. Practice is that somebody else will read your supplemental question. I don't know whether Ms. Reid you want to follow that practice on this occasion as well.
It's as the question. In 2021-22, the rate of children looked after per 10,000 for Herefordshire was 112, but the statistical neighbours' average was 64.3. Both rates would have included similar rates of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. Herefordshire's very high rates of children in care could be substantially reduced, thus slashing expenditure. The high rate is highlighted in the Commissioner's report. It states, most of the additional funding has met the cost of increased number of placements for looked after children. Will the concerns of the Children's Commissioner about number and cost of children in care be prioritised by at pace implementing family group conferences, increased investment in relatively cheap family support and reunification?
Councillor Toynbee.
Yes, thank you. Yes, the concerns of the Children's Commissioner are being prioritised, absolutely. As far as unaccompanied asylum-seeking children are concerned, it's quite difficult to compare rates between different areas because the mandatory national transfer scheme is fairly recent and not all councils did offer homes to these children. So we just have to be a little bit careful about comparing rates. And as far as family group conferencing is concerned, yes, we are committed to introducing that and to working faster on exploring reunification. And all of this is outlined in the improvement plan. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Toynbee. Then moving on to item 5, to receive questions from councillors. There are 3 questions from councillors. And I don't know whether there are any supplemental questions. The first question was Councillor Milne.
Yes, I do have a supplemental, which is as follows. I asked in my original question the Cabinet member if she agrees that it would be better the Commission not progress phosphate trading for the agricultural sector, given the novelty, complexity and risks associated with such a scheme. And in her response, she said she agrees, then enthuses about voluntary inter-farm trading managed as an interim solution. There is no track record for agricultural pea trading, and the pool scheme, which is for nitrates, is very different. Given the fierce objections from Friends of Upper Wye, the Wye Salmon Association campaign for the protection of all Wales Citizen Science Group and others, would the Cabinet member now agree unambiguously that this should not be regressed? I add a little extract from the joint statement from CPRW and FOUW published yesterday, which says a phosphate trading scheme will not be sufficient to restore the Wye to favourable conservation status, the headline aim of the Commission. There is a high risk that ticking the phosphate trading solution, quote unquote, solution box will actually prevent effective, timely, integrated effort to restore the Wye to favourable conservation status.
I'd like to thank Councillor Milne for his question. I think it's far too early to be ruling anything out. This is a difficult problem where the options need to be considered properly, and my feeling is that it's appropriate that we continue to keep everything on the table, including doing difficult things like getting agreement to voluntary phosphate reduction schemes alongside increased regulation and oversight. I wouldn't wish to rule anything out at this stage, and so we're continuing to recommend that there's options are considered and reported back to the July council meeting on an improved view of which options are showing prospect for delivering certainty for our river.
Thank you, Councillor Hardy. I move on then to the next question, which is from Councillor Shaw. I don't know whether Councillor Shaw has a supplemental.
He has a written supplemental. His supplementary question says, thank you for the information provided. Can you specifically identify how many pedal power lights and electric bikes were purchased by each of the funds each year? And in particular, how many were purchased against the town spend in some projects, and how much was expended? Can the Cabinet member confirm that all of the bikes purchased are available?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Shaw, for that question. The short answer is we don't own any bikes as a council, barrel owner of bikes. Our costs are associated with infrastructure that we put in as part of the deal. I've given him the detail on the spend on that. I can provide a little bit more detail if you'd like it. In relation to bikes that are still available, I think in the entirety of the scheme we've lost 2 bikes, which is fantastic. One ended up in a tree on fire and one was thrown in the river right at the beginning. And since then, we have had the lowest level of vandalism in the entire country and world where Beryl have bikes, including America, and they praise Herefordians, and they're very grateful that the phrase "I'll Beryl it" is entered into our lexicon. And can I take this opportunity to thank the Conservative administration for bringing in the Beryl bikes? I think it was a fantastic scheme. We were very happy to continue and support it. Funny enough, when we have consultations, even people who are very, let's say, road-minded are praiseworthy of Beryl and would like to see more bays. So we're working very hard on that. And can I further take the opportunity just to say, as I probably will not speak in his official capacity again, thank you to Nigel for his hard work for 2 terms as a cabinet member. Well, 1 term as a cabinet member and another term as a councillor. It has been a a privilege to work with him, and it does shame that someone with his quality is stepping down, but it's understandable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrington. Councillor Shaw may wish to frame your thanks. I don't know quite how you do that. So the third question is from Councillor Jenny Hewitt, and I don't know whether Councillor Hewitt has a supplemental question.
I've not received any supplementary.
Thank you very much. So then moving on to item 6, I don't think there's anything under item 6, reports from scrutiny committees. No, okay, so I move on then to there are quite a few substantive items on this agenda. Okay, thank you very much, George. So, Councillor Davis, can I just confirm that you have no Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 interests?
I don't.
For this meeting. So, item 7, draft Hereford City Master Plan. Purpose of this is to approve the draft Hereford City Master Plan, vision for our city in 2050, and it's attached to the papers, and it will be going out for further consultation later on this year. The report starts on page 11 of the agenda pack. Councillor Harrington, would you like to say anything on this item?
I will, Leader, but because we have such a packed agenda, I will not labour that point. It's just important to remember this is a draft for consultation, so anything that is received in terms of feedback from the Cabinet or group leaders will be very gratefully received, as will the consultation responses when it goes out to the public domain. The genesis of the master plan is, whilst we have a local plan or core strategy which deals in broad allocations of land, and while we have plans for particular parts of the cities or our towns, this master plan is the first to provide critical thinking as how Hereford City functions overall. I feel it's long overdue. It will provide us with a framework on how we move and how we plan, placemaking and transport. Things can be moved in and out of the plan. If there are changes, or we have lectures coming up, then we hope that the framework is strong. Some elements will remain, some elements may move. But the most important thing for us to do is to have this kind of resource to be able to plan correctly and long-term for the city. And I'll leave it at that. We'll answer questions.
Okay, any questions from Cabinet members? Councillor Crockett.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to endorse this report here, because I do think it's really important that we get consultation from everybody, and this is the right way forward. It's a huge document and it's not to be taken lightly, and I thank everybody for their hard work, and yeah, let's get this consultation done.
Councillor Harrington, I represent Stony Street Ward as well, so we're not in the city, but I've had to express comments from them saying that what happens in the city does affect them, like parking and getting in and that sort of thing. So does this consultation just reflect people in Hereford, or is it county-wide?
No, it won't just reflect people in Hereford City, and I know that's a criticism that's often made, and quite justifiably sometimes, but it is the city. It will inform how people who come into work or to shop in Hereford, or to drop their kids off at school, or perhaps drop them further from school and let them walk in future, will come into play. And also, just so they're not left out, we have another item later on, the local transport plan, which will specifically deal with other elements of our market towns and our, how our villages and interact.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Davis.
Thank you for this, and thanks Office for the work I know that has gone into it for the last manic few months. I just wondered if you could confirm, I've noted was in there that talks about the equality duty, etc., and that you're going to deal with stakeholders. From my perspective, what I always find with consultations is that consultations are predominantly from people who are angry about something or who are totally against it, much the same as social media if you go on that. And I suppose one of the things that I've learned since doing the new Hereford Museum plans is that consultation with young people is so essential. I mean, the draft master plan that we're talking about here is for the future. This is about trying to get Hereford City into a position where we retain our young people, where they've got activities, where we retain really good jobs for them. And I just wondered whether you would be doing formal consultation with young people, children and young people, and also taking into account the really good access that we have in Hereford City. So we're predominantly flat. We're working on the wide marsh curve, which might help for a lot of people. But other than that, we'll be working with equality groups, because I think if we get this right and there's an equality lens through all of our plans, we can really attract more tourism, more people that can come to Herefordshire, that it's accessible so that they can live, they can work, they can play in our city.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davies. I know that in our consultation so far, we have consulted with schools. Whether or not we've consulted more directly, obviously everyone's got the opportunity to feedback. We'll have the opportunity to feedback through the main portals of the consultation, but I shall give what you said some thought and see if there's something we might do with the junior mayors in Hereford or market towns, or what else we could do to satisfy that. I'll come back to you on that.
I can suggest, I would quite like it to be done in the same way as the museum project was, i.e. we've got an incredible amount of cultural organisations within Herefordshire, and they've done a film in which they've done drones of the museum. They've also gone out and got young people to come in and make a video and describe what they want. I really would recommend that, because for me, consultation throughout the council on all of our projects is really quite dull. And you know, it's really long, it's got really complex words, it's not normally in plain English. And I think we need to think differently about how we're doing that kind of consultation if we really want to hear from different people, because young people are not going to scroll through a Herefordshire Council meeting or consultation point. You know, they're going to engage with TikTok, they're going to engage with social media, they're going to engage with, you know, actual living, breathing consultation. So it'd be really helpful, bearing in mind this is about the future, if we could really think a little bit broader when we're doing that consultation.
Yeah, I can confirm that we do that. We will do that. And I mean, one of the things we did to get this far was we used Commonplace, which is an app that's very, very helpful and very accessible to young people, because it's easy to jump on and make a comment. But I'll discuss with Mr. Crossland. What do you want to come in, Mr. Crossland?
Yes, members, if I can just confirm that Councillor Davies has suggested a very good, the two project teams are in touch, so that's a project.
Brilliant.
He's talking to learn out lessons from the Museum of the Libraries project, to look at how we can engage with all the difficult and rich groups to go for consultation and so on.
Thank you.
Councillor Chance.
Thanks. I'd like to echo the thanks that's gone to officers and to Councillor Harrington for the hard work in developing this. I think it's really significant that we do now have a draft master plan for the city that, you know, sets out that future direction essentially, and I think it's a great vision. And it's also really kind of notable that it really values the history of the city and the heritage of the city as well. So it values our past, respects our past, and sets out a clear vision for the future. And you know, this core point that it is aligned with what government has said it wants, which is that public transport and active travel should be the natural first choice for our daily activities. And I think that is that's an area where we are fully aligned as an administration, and we really agree with central government. That is what we need. And for me, I see in the master plan also a real recognition of, you know, there are some groups in the population who, for reason of disability or other restrictions, do need road space and so forth. And this is about sharing the space more equally, making it easier for everybody to get around, so that we do better on equalities as well. So I really look forward to the consultation and very much welcome the work that's been done to come up with this this vision, which I think is very helpful overall.
Good, thank you very much. Anybody else? Councillor Tyler, you're remote, you're fine, okay. So I'll move on then to the group leaders, and at the end ask Councillor Mill his comments as well, please. So I'll go through the same list. I think Councillor James, you're on the top of the list. And then it's Councillor Lester and Councillor Matthews.
I'm not sure why I'm, well, I could make some suggestions on why I'm top of the list, but I have to say, it's unfortunate that this has come at this particular time in the life of this council, because it's such a vast subject, such a vast plan, that members are not going to give it the full appraisal that it would be earlier in the cycle of the council. So far, I've been very, very sceptical about this, the ones that have seen this. And there are some things in it, and we haven't got the time to go into the individual merits of individual parts of this plan. There are some things there that are, to be frank, a no-go. I mean, suggesting that you can turn the A49 into a single lane, that will have single lanes, at Lyme Gate. You'll have queues back to Ludlow. That never happened without a bypass. It is farcical. But there are some things that are good and some things that are not. But as I say, it'll be up to the public, the election and the following, as to what they think about these things. The consultation, well, unfortunately, what will happen, I'm afraid, is so often people will latch on to bits of it, and they'll be for it or against it, and they won't look at the whole of it. So we'll see, but it will be for the new council to decide what happens and how it will happen.
Councillor Harrington.
Yeah, well, I appreciate Councillor James's comments. I mean, the point about this is there will be time to read the detail and hopefully get back with some responses over the next few weeks and months, and we wait with interest for his comments. In relation to the 49, I don't think we don't own the 49. I don't think we're reducing it down to a single carriageway. Maybe councillors thinking about Commercial Street. Mr. Crossland?
No, I think what Councillor James is referring to is the artist sketch that's in the master plan, where it shows a staggered crossing across the A49 rather than the current underpass. There is no intention, maybe it's the artistic pressure, which leaves before we get to consultation.
I think we've done
it remains as 2 lanes. The only proposal is probably to widen the central presentation to take it from 3 to 2, which should the Eastern River crossing go ahead, would probably reduce the flows on there to allow that to happen, for you to get a staggered junction. The reason it's staggered and not straight across, which is what many people want, is members will know there is a significant level difference across there. So the original road was built, the road widened towards the city wall, and it is slightly higher than the existing Victoria Street was. So I don't think it is engineered possible to get it straight across. You can certainly get a staggered junction, which will be much better than which will be much better than the existing underpasses at the moment. There is no proposal to reduce it at the moment.
Okay.
So a single lane.
Thank you, Mr. Crossland, and Mr. Councillor James will get that, make sure that's clear in the presentation, and we get everyone on the right side of the road as well. Thank you.
Councillor Lester.
Yes, thank you. Just be advised, there's a lot of background noise and it's making it very difficult for those of us on Zoom to hear it. I don't know where the microphone is based, but we're getting a lot of desktop noise, and when that coincides with speakers, it's difficult to hear what's being said. So just please bear that in mind. Yeah, I think we would have, as the Conservative group, perhaps benefited from a little bit more debate before it's gone to consultation. But as Councillor Harrington says, here it is for consultation, so we will make our comments. We think the overall aspiration for urban renewal, wanting a more vibrant and attractive city, what's not to like about that? That's really good, and we welcome this wholeheartedly. Sure, Hereford residents would really like these improvements, but not just Hereford residents. Of course, it's everyone in Herefordshire that uses Hereford as their service centre, and I'm sure that any enhancement there would be welcomed by all of those residents. Note Councillor Harrington's point about it being a flexible document, and I think that's a very important ethos to build into the document, because if everything's set in stone, it doesn't have the ability to flex itself as we have changing times, like we've certainly experienced over the 4 years, but I won't go into those. And as Councillor Chown says, I would agree, any master plan has to respect the history and the culture of the city and the environment around. So I think that's a very important thing. We notice and we welcome the focus on more active travel measures, giving members of the public a choice in how they move about the city and when they arrive in the city is obviously something that we would very much support. We would also say that it's extremely important that there is a consultation and a meaningful consultation. And I echo Councillor David's point about making sure we reach out to young and older and as many people as we can, because it's only by having the buy-in from members of the public and residents that these policies and ideas are actually going to take hold and achieve the outcomes that are wanted. I have to say that, including in a master plan something that has Eric, which Councillor Harrington, that's a new one on me, but the Eastern River Crossing, that to us we just think is the wrong idea to have in this plan, but we're going to talk about that shortly anyway, so I'll save my breath and save you all so I don't repeat myself on that particular point. But we've had a member of the public talk about the 7% that are only trying to go through, whereas 40% are moving around. Not all of those trips, it has to be acknowledged, can be done on public transport, and there are legitimate reasons why people use their motor car in the city. And also when you think about the fact that there are 2/3 of Herefordshire's population who don't live in the city, they live in market towns or they live in a very dispersed rural area. Anything that frustrates that use of the car may have severe consequences to the viability of Hereford itself. So promote active travel measures so that members of the public, whether they're inside the city or outside the city, can use those to the benefit of everyone in the environment. But if it's too it's set in a way that's too restrictive to the car, it's going to frustrate motorists, and it's going to frustrate those who are trying to get into work and to use services that you cannot necessarily use when you're on public transport. So looking for a more balanced view, if possible, to ensure that everyone has their opportunity to use their modes of travel, which in a way shares space, which I think is a very good point, but it must not be at the detriment of frustrating motorists when that's their only option. So that's our points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lesser. Councillor Matthews.
Well, I must say it's all been very mild so far, which surprises me, Leader. First of all, there's some few good points in there. The electric buses and active travel, fully support that. That's the way forward. There's no problem with that. This includes providing new, affordable, high-quality homes. Most of that building land is on floodplain. It'll cost the earth to build and raise the footings of those houses, so how you will keep those affordable, I do not know. The other thing is the open space and nature, etc., for people to enjoy. Fully support that, and that Riverside Rollerus plan which I referred to, Leader, which you also are fully aware of, which is Nature Trust, etc. I'm glad that you've got that and warmly welcomed, and I think that would be a big success. Then you're talking about creating a thriving local economy and protecting and enhancing our environment. How it's going to bring about a thriving local economy, I don't know, because we're struggling to bring things forward now and get a thriving local economy as we stand now. So that one worries me greatly. The other thing, excuse me, I've got notes everywhere. when you say about continue to support and develop the Hereford enterprise, well, I don't know whether somebody can answer this question, but I'll ask it, leader, anyway. I understand there's quite a few contracts with people at Rotherham at the moment that have been held up for several months for some reason, and the contracts haven't been signed. Can you tell us why that is so? Then I go on, leader, to propose this plan will merely discourage people from rural areas and adjoining counties, in particular from visiting Hereford City, resulting in empty shops, closed banks, and much more, resulting in a general deterioration of the local economy. Plans like these will only work if they provide major improvements to the county's infrastructure so that traffic can circle and get about. Like such a thing as the upgrade of the A49 to Ross, the New River Bridge, whichever way it must be, but I support the eastern one, the upgrading of the bridge on Belmont Road, which is what the county's largest employer has requested, and park and ride. Unless you've got those movements to handle people to come in, it'll be so congested, you just won't get people to come in, together with your very, very stiff car parking charges and on-street parking charges. It'll drive people away. The above improvements would greatly reduce the congestion in and around the city, which would encourage visitors and drive them and not drive them away to do their business elsewhere. Because if they can't drive in a park within a reasonable time for a reasonable cost, people travelling for some distance just won't come. Local businesses where there is free car parking are absolutely thriving, like Old Church, Roman Road, and what have you. So parking is quite a big issue. Now, this is something that I genuinely believe, leader, and respect to you, Councillor Harrington. I think this plan is drawn up far more to suit a large urban area than a rural country city. And I think it's all right, these things will work where you've got buses running and supported and maintained, running every quarter of an hour, 10 minutes, but in a rural area it's totally different. Unless we get the county and its surroundings moving, and even to bring businesses in, unless we improve the infrastructure, nothing's going to move. So I've got great concerns about what the outcome of this plan will be. Obviously, people work and be success, but we have got great concerns. I think it's comforting to read the Cabinet approved commencement of consultation in respect of the draft Hereford City Master Plan. I think it's imperative, like others have said, that we see what the public say. They might not agree with me, but literally dozens have been in touch and expressing great concerns about what's been suggested. I believe it.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. You had some volume there, so I'm pleased about that. Yes, Councillor Davies.
There was something, sorry, about delays in contracts in Rotherham, and I just wanted clarification for that, because
what it was, it's come to my attention that quite a few people, Councillor Davis, have got small businesses there which they've been wanting, and contracts have been signed up, and they've been delayed for some reason, which perhaps you could explain. That they haven't been signed, it's been going on for several months, and if you could tell us, I'd be grateful.
I think the leader knows.
Yeah, Councillor Matthews, it's about people who are looking to purchase land estates. Yes, so there have been valuation issues, and those are now being resolved. And I see Mr. Ross is nodding his head. Those should be going ahead now. Thank you. Councillor Harrington, I don't know if there's any of those points you wanted to on. I think
I'll just very quickly respond. I mean, you know,
Councillor Matthews likes a bit of response.
Yes, I'm happy to give Councillor Matthews a response. So first of all, this is a plan that requires consultation, so hopefully he will put his thoughts down in writing as well as telling us in the room. We are not very different in things like car parking charging from our surrounding areas. We have to use charging to maintain, to prevent congestion in the city centres. That is normal. We do want to allow lower charges on the outskirts, so places that are walkable for those that can walk, for those that can't. There will still be disabled bays, and there will still be the ability to pay extra if you want to go into the middle of the town. So it's not about being dogmatic and preventing people from having opportunities. Coming back to some of the questions around the amount of people and 40% of the traffic in Hereford being local, 40% of the journeys within the city are actually also less than 1.2 miles. And so that if we can persuade people that it's actually more pleasant to walk, or they can get a ferry, or they can do something else, those are the things we should be thinking about. We shouldn't just be reactive, we should be saying, right, how do we look at a city as it goes forward? You can't simply just have more and more cars in a city. You don't want to deny those people who have to have cars to use their car. They come in from the outskirts, especially while we haven't been able to get public transport sorted because the government's let us down on funding repeatedly, as it did Worcestershire and Gloucestershire and everywhere else. So this plan comes in stages, and as I said, and as Councillor Lester's read back to me, we're looking at a framework that things can be put in and out of as we work along that. You have to think about a future. You can't think of it ad hoc. Just in relation to vibrancy, people want to go to places where it's pleasant, where you can sit and have a cup of tea. When we had our emergency active travel measures, which many people didn't like until they sat down on a bench outside and thought this is rather nice. That is what we're trying to do. We're trying to encourage people who would like to come to Hereford to shop for longer. And so if they park somewhere like the swing baths and walk into town and they're not worried and stressed about how long they're there and how much it's costing, they hopefully will spend more money in a nice environment. And that is the point of trying to plan the city and improve the enhancements and bring back things like the city walls into the fore of our attractions. In relation to school transport, that's another major issue that's never been properly tackled. We all know if we go through Hereford that if it's school holidays, we suddenly realise we're 10, 15 minutes ahead of schedule. That's never been dealt with sufficiently. How can you have an issue like that and not deal with it and think, well, what's causing this? And, as many have said, sometimes that's because everyone's off on holiday, to be fair, but there is still a huge amount of work that can be done around that to make sure that we're allowing children to safely cycle or walk to school, which is their right. They should be allowed to do that. We shouldn't having parents so worried that they're driving their kids to the door. We should be able to create school zones and create walking buses and all the sort of thinking that should have been going on. And as I've said many times to my Conservative colleagues, we are very similar in many respects. We're all giving up our time to do a job that's difficult. And the only sort of criticism I've had is that to sort of fixate on one major road scheme rather than doing all the other work at the same time is the only real criticism I have, and that's what we're trying to do. And just final point in relation to Bridge Dollars, Councillor Matthews will know that the work that we have had commissioned has come back on that, so the results are in, but the jury's out at the moment, Councillor Matthews, and we will give you that detail when I have it.
Thank you, Councillor Harrington. Moving on then to Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, Leader, the Greens are very supportive of this plan, welcoming the consultation and the time to be able to feed into it properly. We feel it's a very positive direction forward for Hereford, and being the mother city of the River Wye Special Area of Conservation, that it draws on the heritage and the ambitions for nature recovery in the county, sort of within the city, certainly to be welcomed. The fact that it links in well with the big economic plan means that there is a proper strategic vision that can actually be developed, and that's really welcomed. Just to say that residents that I consulted with south of the city were sort of really adamant that a park and ride should be included so that they could park their cars on the edge of the city and then use all the wonderful active travel opportunities within the city. So I have asked them to feed that back in the consultation and realize that this will be an ongoing consultation. I'll leave it at that because I'm sure Councillor Milne, whose ward covers a lot of this area, will have more to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Leader. Independents for Herefordshire are totally in support of the master plan. If we're going to meet the challenges of the 21st century, then we do have to
introduce all these sort of initiatives that are included in this plan. And so we look forward to its development over the coming months. I do hope, as a member for a rural ward, that I would echo what was just said there by Councillor Fagan. I would really like to see a bit more emphasis on park and ride if it could be. And then just a thought on the thriving local economies. It seems to me, from my experience, that in general, if you encourage the artistic, creative people to establish themselves, then the thriving local economy naturally follows. So ideas to support the creative artistic ventures are particularly welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Milne.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And from a ward member perspective, I can say that I very, very warmly endorse and support this document. It's seldom that I open a report from the council and feel such complete empathy and with it. I feel a distinct compliment is owed to officers and consultants for producing this. They've grasped the issues very well. They've undertaken a good analysis of how to address them, and I really take my hat off to it. The master plan really owes its genesis to the visit in October 2017 of Historic England's Urban Panel, which recommended very strongly that we progress with the master plan. It also recommended that we progress to the design code, which we did commission. And so 5 years on, it's absolutely great that we finally have this. The Urban Panel's observations are pretty much those of the master plans. I mean, they arrived at the station and were utterly horrified by the appalling public realm and the very poor sense of welcome and the deeply hostile environment for pedestrians that met them at that time the new inner city link road was being constructed. And while there were some pretty vicious criticism of some of the work that we were doing in Hereford at the time, which was very car-centered and pedestrian unfriendly, we have turned a corner. We must turn a corner because of the climate emergency and because of our personal health, and because, as Councillor Harrington says, we cannot indefinitely carry on filling our streets with motor cars. A road-based narrative for the future only ever worsens traffic congestion, only ever worsens emissions, and that there is literally no other solution than to prioritise public transport and active travel, and that's what the master plan does. So it's terrific in its comprehension and recommendations for transport, for the heritage, the city walls, for all the aspects, and I love its 12 big ideas. Just to dwell briefly on a couple of them, the access to the River Wye, which is very much about Bartonshire Meadows. The Meadows actually, in a funny sort of way, where we are is a culmination of many years' work by my community in delicate negotiations with the church commissioners in securing a lease for the Wildlife Trust to restore those meadows for improved biodiversity and public access. And we've just secured that now. So that's a terrific bit of good news. And it's really nice that we may be able to start making progress on one of the big ideas straight away. What I would say though is it would be nice to see some kind of framework and implementation plan along with this. I mean, just doing the Bartonshire Meadows because at the moment it's an easy thing to do. We've got it all lined up to make a start, isn't necessarily the right way of going about things, and that we need to know really how the various actions are prioritized and cascaded. For example, with the commercial road corridor, clearly we need to do commercial road first, and that it's hopeless to spend a lot of investment on developing the backland sites around commercial road, important though that is, for the regeneration of that very degraded urban environment, which chronically underperforms by any measure, economic and environment. We have to do the road itself. So it would be great to see some designs, and I'm just going to give a little plug for for Darren Ray, who's produced some excellent designs for commercial road and how to address the very great challenges of that, including the junctions, the Kerry and the KFC junctions at either end, which are probably about the most lethal points, apart from the Steeles roundabout, in the whole city for anybody outside of a car. So those are the sort of things we have to do first, because none of it works otherwise. We can't promote active travel, and we can spend money on active travel routes, but if they simply fall apart at dangerous junctions, it's not that the investment is poor. So it would be great to see some sort of implementation plan of cascade, prioritized cascade, come out of this, so that we know roughly in which order the different components are delivered in. Okay, thank you very much, Leader. That's all I need to say.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Okay, so I think I'll go to the recommendation, which are all set out in the report. Cabinet members, are you all in favour? Thank you very much. So the next item, item 8. This is the report on Eastern River Crossing and Link Road. Another one for you, Councillor Harrington.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I've got the lion's share, much like Councillor Price, well, ex-Councillor Price used to have in the good old days, and we know what it's like to be in the firing line. This report is for Eastern River Crossing, or ERIC as officers have started calling it, and perhaps I shouldn't be calling it that myself, but we will see what happens with that. We do have proposals for other names. We may put that to a public ballot, which we'll see. This seeks Cabinet's approval of the scheme objectives and suggests a broad timetable, which we hope to further truncate to take the scheme through to construction and operation. It also asks Cabinet to note the progress in developing the strategic outline business case for the crossing and the link road, and further authorises the Director of Highways and Transport to take operational decisions associated with progressing the strategic outline business case in consultation with the Cabinet member for infrastructure and transport. The Hereford Transport Strategy Review that took place after we came in as the new administration identified the Eastern Crossing as essential to provide an alternative crossing to address the issues of resilience. We only really have one bridge, still called the New Bridge, Greyfriars Bridge, which was built in 1966. And although we have an old bridge, it accessed off the same junction, is obviously not suitable for all of modern traffic. A bridge at Rotherwas will be of great benefit to the business community at Rotherwas, as Councillor Matthews and Councillor Kenyon have often raised before, and also be of great value to the most densely populated quadrant in the city, which is in the northeast. It is also the quadrant that has the most amount of traffic movement and short journeys. This is obviously just a river crossing and a link road up onto Ledby Road, potentially. It does not cross the Lug Flats. It is not a bypass. It is an access road, and I think that's an important thing to remember. We have a good understanding of our traffic patterns in Hereford. Only 7% of traffic is trying to go through the city. The rest of it is trying to get in and around it, and therefore that is something that we need to address and should have addressed a long time ago. Following on from the Hereford Transport Strategy Review, where the Council voted as a majority to pursue an Eastern Crossing, we commissioned a gap analysis report first, which was comprehensive, a review of the existing policy strategies and previous strategies, of which there was a lot. We also looked at the funding options, and the report is attached. The conclusions of the gap analysis and the pre-feasibility work was that the strategic need for an additional river crossing is well evidenced, and the strategic outline business case should be progressed. Initial estimates put the cost at around 56 million compared to nearly 200 million for a western crossing alone. 250 million plus, 250 million if you add in the other elements. The problem with the Western Crossing compared to an Eastern Bridge for Resilience is the huge amount of environmental damage that will be caused. It is by far the most damaging route, which is why we made sure that we did not vote for it. This Conservative government is committed to net zero, and it's a further incentive to address the city's transport on a resilience and modal shift basis, not just by building more roads. Recent announcements on halting all non-essential road schemes and reviewing all schemes against value for money and climate change target is another indicator this administration in Hereford that has got things just about right, and I refer to the Welsh Government's decisions. I think I'll leave it at that and open up to questions. This is the right way to go. We should have probably done this a long time ago, like master plans and everything else, but we're here now. We do need a bridge for resilience. Thank you.
Okay, so any questions, comments? I suppose, Councillor Harrington, the question of a lot of people have is why is it going to take so long to get this up and running? It has been, I don't know how many years in the making. Now we're on the road for this particular approach. Why do you think it's going to take so long?
I think it's a natural caution from consultants to promise anything too soon. There are hoops that you've got to go through in relation to the DFT, in particular, being satisfied that schemes are justified, particularly if you want to seek funding from them. There are some processes that have to be got through: the environmental assessments, the mitigation, the building, the design, the planning application. So unfortunately, these things do take time. I was ambitious when I said it could be done in 5 years. I mean, that was far too ambitious, but I do think that we can get it done by the end of the decade, if not slightly before. We have made it very clear to officers and to consultants that we expect them to, when we are engaged on this, solely occupied with this project. So, for example, we'll have dedicated officers dealing with this, and we will also have dedicated consultants with this. We will not be wanting consultants that are sharing different projects in the office. So we'll do everything we can to truncate the process. We're very fortunate that it's a much shorter area with less landowners who are at the moment are showing favourable signs of wanting to work with us, and we will take it as it comes.
Thank you. Councillor Davies?
I don't mind Eric, by the way. It's fine. Depends. It shows your age on what it reminds you of. It reminds me of Flat Eric, if anybody remembers that. They'll all be looking.
With the Eric Morecambe generation.
So just a couple of things really going on from what you were just talking about. There's two things that I'm concerned about. One is, how certain are we that this will be approved? And I guess that's a really difficult question to ask. And just because I quite like annoying Councillor Matthews, I'm going to beat him to the question that he's probably going to ask, which is, how are we going to ensure from a project perspective that this is staying on track? Because we know that at the moment with cost of inflation, etc., that the money that we're proposing, etc., for projects, even a delay of 6 months is massively affecting it. So I just wondered if you could confirm those two things.
So if I answer the last one first, I mean, that is the point that we've made. We know from previous experience of the South Wide Transport Package and the Hereford Transport Package that a lack of focus allows things to drift, and you get 10 years or 5 years of paying consultants and don't even get a business case submitted or started in some cases. So it's extremely important that we manage this more intensely. I think the fact that we've made major changes in how the project teams work within the council means that we will have dedicated people on the job, but we'll insist on that. And in relation to our consultants, the point we've made before is that we will expect that work to be dedicated. So we will do everything possible to truncate that process. In relation to whether we'll get it or not, there are environmental constraints on the east as they are on the west. That both areas are in a sack. You have to mitigate. You have to understand that. You have to understand all the other elements around floodplains. It all depends, essentially, to some extent, on where you expect to get the funding. If you want to get the funding from the DFT, then the process is longer and sometimes more skewed towards certain factors. If you're looking to match fund or mix that funding up, which we have looked at all the options for, then it's possible to get things done a bit more quickly. We don't want a ground bridge. We want a bridge that's sensible, that crosses the road, that has access to for active travel measure as well, and does the job.
Just to come back then, Councillor Harrington, just on those points then, from your perspective, the fact that it's a shorter route, the fact that it's not going over the lug flats, is that the thing that gives you a bit more surety?
Yes, absolutely. It is a shorter route. It is not intended to be a bypass. It's an access road for essentially residents and people trying to get to Roldworth.
Thank you.
Any more observations, comments, questions? No? Okay, so I'll move on then. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. The overwhelming majority of the public in Hereford want and support a bypass for Hereford. I support a Eastern Bridge and a Western Bridge. Now, in the 1990s, John Selwyn Gummer, when it was put to the then Conservative government, ruled out any suggestion of an eastern route across the Lough Meadows for a bypass. When we came into life as Herefordshire Council, we had a new government, a Labour government. So we went to them and asked them if they would support an eastern route, and they ruled it out. That's why the western route was looked at and was the way that it could happen. Now, the idea that's been suggested is that if we have this eastern bridge, we can have a bypass. No, it will block any suggestion of a bypass on the eastern side. But the public are crying out for a bypass for Hereford. And if you don't know that, then you're not in touch with the people of Hereford. There should be a referendum to ask the people of Hereford whether they want a bypass or not. And you will have a shock. Private polling has been done and it's overwhelming. And yet you have stopped that happening. As far as the bridge is concerned, the Eastern Bridge, I support it. But it has to be part of a much larger infrastructure project for Hereford City. The people of Hereford are fed up with this prevarication of the bypass. They want it, and they will ultimately have it.
Thank you, Councillor James. Nice to know a little bit of peace is breaking out because you're supporting an Eastern Bridge, so that's we will take that, and let's hope that we can definitely deliver. And then maybe in the future there'll be a requirement for something extra. We'll see. I'm sure, Councillor Harrington, you'll want to correct one or two misconceptions.
Well, yes, certainly within relation to an eastern bypass, Councillor James, we wouldn't not intending to bypass it in any shape or form. It is an access road that does not go across the part of the Lough Meadows that contains the Lammas Meadows. So that is not going to have the same issues, and we won't have to roll John Selwyn Gummer out of retirement. I'm not sure if he's the one who fed his child a beef burger, was that someone else? Yes. Okay. Anyway, he won't be required to come to Hereford on that point. We need access. We don't need bypasses. We don't want people going around Hereford. We want them accessing the city that they love and want to work in. I mean, people, if you talk to people about bypasses, what they mean is a bridge. They want another bridge. They want the congestion issues. They want the resilience issues resolved. And that is what we're doing the right way. You talk about referendums, you talk about, we have elections coming up, we will see where it goes. We were elected, the majority of us, on a mandate of not wanting a Western Bridge, but thinking that an eastern access and modal shift was the correct thing to do. We got a majority. If that's not the case next time, we'll live with that. You will have the opportunity to do what you'd like to do, but I'm very convinced that we're doing the right thing. Thank you.
I think MPs having been mentioned, I know Jesse Norman is very supportive.
Well, both MPs were very supportive. When we came in as administration, one MP in the North changed his view slightly, but I think is still vaguely supportive.
And the one in the South is now claiming it's his idea. So, I think we'll take.
Well, it's a three-way tie between Councillor Kenny and Councillor Matthews and our MP in the South.
No, you mentioned well, I was going to say mention Councillor Matthews. He's next, but he's not actually. Councillor Lester.
Well, thank you. Listened to the debate so far with interest, and Councillor Harrington's comments, which I don't always agree with, as he knows. it's interesting for him to note that these things take time and take a great deal of time because they're such complex packages and processes and projects to deliver. So, you know, to hear him in the past criticize the Conservative administration for not having finished everything is interesting in that context when he accepts just how long it is to make such important and integral changes to Hereford City and Herefordshire as a whole. So it's positive to note that this administration does accept that congestion is a problem for motorists. But congestion in the city centre is not only a blight for those stuck in it, but also for those who have to live in it in terms of air quality and noise. Now, this administration knows that the Conservative group are firm in their belief that the cancellation of the Western Bypass and the Southern Link Road and all of the active travel measures that were planned with it was a huge mistake. And we also now know, as I recently found out and said, that this mistake has cost the taxpayer over £22 million. It will be very interesting to note the consultation responses that will be given back to the Hereford Master Plan, seeing as the Eastern Link is integral to it. And we shall see. The report, it must be remembered that the report that the administration that commissioned to review the logic of the bypass that was published in October 2020, it said that it, rather than talk about the 7% figure, it's important to note that 7% plus 20 odd percent, 27% plus 25%. So that equals 59% of traffic is either trying to get in, out or through. So that's the significant majority of traffic. And with that in context, their own report concluded that the transport package, which includes the Western Bypass, is forecast to provide greatest congestion relief to the city and greatest resilience for the transport network. I've said that before, and unless you commission a new report that contradicts that, then that's the report you paid for, and it must still hold true. I think the important point about how an Eastern Link is going to be funded, and the Conservative group are well aware of this, is that it only ever happens if you get government funding. And as I understood it at the time, when I was leader of the council and discussed the matter with the Prime Minister, and my colleagues discussed the matter with government and transport, is that you will get funding for such projects if they deliver on lots of achievable outcomes. And so that's at the heart of all of this. And the Western Bypass project was looking very, very favourable, and Connect Midlands were saying that, that was one of their prime objectives. The regional powerhouse initiative was really trying to promote, is because it was going to achieve something that was not only going to provide housing and more infrastructure, but provide a problem to the A49. We note from the report that you will be assessing the positive outcomes with the business case. Well, the Southern Link Road, cancelled by this administration, would have helped the lives of those residents, Hereford residents who live along Holme Lacey Road, and it would have helped the enterprise zone in the Hereford Enterprise Zone. Cannot see how the Southern Link that's proposed is going to benefit those households. And we are very concerned about the impact that depositing an access road onto the A4, the road that's just before you get to Lugwardine with a small bridge, will have a detrimental effect to those communities nearby. But the point really is, going in this direction, how is that really going to address the major issue, which is the Greyfriars Bridge and the congestion that is created because people want to go along the A49. Just to add, you know, my Conservative colleagues and I are not fixated on a road. We were just wanting to provide the right infrastructure as a whole package to ensure that it addressed many issues that Hereford and Herefordshire faced. And we just think that this proposal that's in front of us is an ill thought out response that tries to make up for what was an irrational decision to cancel the Southern Link Road and the Western Bypass, because they were the things that were going to create growth and the need to adjust congestion. But you know, we think you're going in the wrong direction, but we shall wait developments with interest. Thank you.
Yes, Harrington, do you want to?
Yes, I'll respond. Thank you very much. And as Councillor Lester says, we don't always agree, but we obviously remain cordial. And I have become a little bit more circumspect about how long things take. However, it must be noted that the previous administration had 12 years to come to not very much when we arrived in 2019. You hadn't got a business case completed for the Southern Link Road after 5 years. You had a fumbled procurement. You had planning permission that you'd have to go back for. So even the money that was allocated via the growth funds through the LEP were not going to be released. You know, it is really a moot point whether or not you would have achieved it. Secondly, in relation to the Hereford transport package and the Western route, Midlands Collect, like my bank manager, will promise me the world, but they will say, where's the business case? You know, yes, John, we'll have a cup of tea or a pint and there's money in the bank. If I don't produce that business case, I won't get it. You could not produce a business case for the Western Bypass, and I don't think you can produce it, quite frankly, in the current environment that we inhabit, including the direction from your own national government. A Conservative government would not give you the money for a Western Bypass. It doesn't make sense. £250 million for 5 minutes worth of journey reduction and congestion reduction, which is very similar to a smaller crossing in the east. It is not logical for a party that is supposed to be the party of sensible finances. You know, it is a shame. And this idea, you know, you make a point that you're not fixated on roads, but as I said earlier, you for 12 years did nothing but think about roads. You didn't bring in any decent infrastructure in terms of cycling that wasn't shared space, the very worst use of cycling and walking that was often used to try and justify funding and applying for you know, bigger road funds. So we are going to tackle congestion, but more than that, we are going to follow the government direction in providing resilience and decarbonisation traffic, decarbonisation of transport, and making sure that we ensure modal shift. People who are going to use that bridge are people who want to go into the areas of the east of Hereford. That might be places like Bartestree and Lugwardine. It might most certainly will be the very congested or very populated, I say, areas of Elston, Hampton Park and Tupsney, and that is what we're trying to do. That's exactly what we're trying to do. So the congestion will be relieved on the central road through the centre of Hereford. We have differences of opinion. That's why this is the right thing to do. In relation to the 20 million, I think that's an admission note. That's not on us. If you put so much money into something that couldn't be achieved after 12 years or anywhere near achievement, then that is really something that you need to hold your hands up to, because we've had to decapitalise that revenue. And that revenue very often came from pothole money that was given to this council to spend on potholes, and it got swallowed up by a big local transport budget and got used inappropriately, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Move to Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, I thought we were on about Eastern River Crossing actually, but there we are. Excuse me. Let's be perfectly blunt about it. We need a crossing either side of the city. And that's why we've been pushing for and I've spoken to you, Leader, about the upgrading of the Bridge-Stollard Road. That serves a crossing to the west of the city. At least that would help to get people over there. We've got a lot of bridges in like tarmac on trailers crying out, plus the military crying out for that to be done. Let's be perfectly honest about it, because these issues have been raised. There's going to be issues whichever way you think of going. You know, you could raise the same environmental issues going to the west, but you would put it to the west where it was proposed, as Councillor Lester said. Within 5 years, it could be an inner city link road. They're going to put 3,000 houses around it. It'll be running straight through large developments. So it wasn't a bypass, it was just, so there's arguments to be made all around, like, you know, so obviously you've got to carefully consider what's before us. One thing that a very successful businessman told me, Councillor Harrison, some time ago, if you want to get on in life and get anything done, excuse this leader, I'm not getting at you, ignore accountants, solicitors and consultants. If you ignore them, you'll get things done, but if you listen to them, you'll never get things done. So it concerns me considerably about this 2931 issue. Now I've got a file here. Department of Transport, West Midlands Regional Office, A49, A465, Hereford Bypass Preferred Route. Preferred route announced on the 4th of August 1988, and it was issued on appeal in 1992. Now, if you look at that, all the papers that you need for that bypass are in that file. So why employ expensive consultants again? The routes are reserved. There's a complex issue of the infrastructure for the bridge. So why is the long delay when it's all there? In my humble opinion, this bridge should be up and running in 4 or 5 years. Properly handled and making use of these documents that are already there and approved by very experienced consultants and engineers who do their stuff. So, you know, it's there, it's all ready, and the council have got copies of that. So I'm wondering whether those have been referred to. So that is my great concern, Councillor Hamilton. Yes, we need that bridge. Secondly, I'm terribly disappointed by the suggested delay. With proper handling and proper pressure on consultants, it should be up and running within 5 years.
Well, obviously, I thank Councillor Matthews for his support in relation to the previous studies. I did actually provide them all, including some reports that went back even further than that were provided to me by someone who's always had a strong interest and collected every single item of this going back to, I think, the late 60s, if not early 70s. The reason we have got to look at things currently is that most of that stuff was 30 years ago. Things change. I'm sure Amanda, Councillor Matthews' intelligence will realise we have to update things. We particularly have to update our transport model. That wasn't updated since 2016. We need to understand what the traffic is doing and how putting a bridge across will make a difference or not. But I totally agree with this sentiment. We're not prepared to accept the kind of delays. What I don't want to hear, and I've said this to our officers, is X is on holiday this week, so we can't do anything for 3 weeks, or Y is away somewhere, so we can't get it to the next council meeting. That will not be happening, Councillor Matthews, and I appreciate your support on that.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Fagan.
Leader, the Greens are in support of this project, and we're pleased to see work moving forward on this. I think that's all we really need to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilding, will you be equally short?
I won't be equally short, Leader, no, but I'll try and keep it as concise as I can. And I'm going to have to just mention the bypass, I'm sorry, but supporters of the bypass have always ignored the evidence that the bypass would only encourage more induced traffic, more carbon, worse air pollution. And this council is taking the climate crisis seriously. And you can't do that if you just constantly back a car-driven society. But moving on to the bridge, the Eastern Crossing, we support this definitely. It's essential for the city's resilience. We believe it's the right solution when you balance the transport demands, the carbon reduction that we need to make, and the environmental concerns. I personally would like to see it as a toll bridge so that discouraged people from just driving back and forth across it. And I'd also like the name Eric McBridgeface, who gets my vote. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilding. We'll miss your humour Thank you. So,
Rita, could we just clarify that the toll and all the stuff was not the official position from the Independents of Herefordshire? That was Councillor Wilding, so.
yes, yeah.
But he did like Harry.
He did like it, yes. I think I can move on then to the recommendations which are set out in the report. Cabinet members, are you in favour? Okay, thank you very much. So moving on then to item 9, the new Herefordshire Local Transport Plan and...
It's me again.
You again.
Good God, right. This is more operational, so hopefully it won't be contentious. Every authority has to have a local transport plan. It is a statutory requirement. It is similar in a sense to a core strategy or a local plan that deals specifically with transport. We have one already that is current from 2016 to 2031, but they are supposed to be reviewed frequently. I think it's 5 years, every 5 years, Mr. Overall. We are reviewing it. Part, as I mentioned earlier, of the work that we need to do is to updating our transport model so we have accurate data. We've been asked to approve the draft timescale. Note it's the previous one is out of date in the sense for referral and delegate officer authority. The good news is that the government's direction on transport and decarbonisation and modal shift very, very well fits in with our own aspirations as a council. I always find it, as I said, and I've said to Councillor Lester before, extraordinary that it kind of jars at a local level and doesn't seem to fit in quite the same way. This plan will also include for the first time in Herefordshire, and will also include for the first time in Herefordshire an LC WIP, which is the local cycling infrastructure plan, and that will be rolled out across and considered in all of our towns, not just Herefordshire, because some of our big towns like Ross and Ledbury are really places that should be considered in terms of decent cycling and walking infrastructure. And the good news about the local transport plan, it applies to the entire county and it matches the transport and travel plans we've done in our market towns when we came in, and also matches the investment plans that Councillor Chowns instigated when we first came in. So we are really trying to make sure that everything is not in Hereford, but the city is bound to its market towns and the interplay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions, clarification? No, I think we'll move on then. Councillor James?
Sorry, it's bleeding obvious, so I have nothing to say.
That's good, thank you. Councillor Lester? Are you still with us? Yes. Councillor Lester? I'll come back to Councillor Lester. Councillor Matthews?
Okay, I see at paragraph 3, the use of public transport and the rollout of infrastructure to support electric vehicles. Obviously, we've got to go down that route and to help save emissions and get as many electric vehicles running as possible. And the other thing is, you decide to harp on about this, continue to support and development of the Hereford Enterprise Zone. Once again, I've been informed, I haven't had it officially from you good people, but are we about running out of land there? Unless we purchase more land, we've got little room for any further growth.
Yes, I think everybody's needs to get in there quickly before it goes. So I think the land there are other bits which are available for redevelopment. I'd have thought an improvement in the future, and there are still some pieces of land which are available.
Are there any plans in place or any thoughts being given for, further such availability of, commercial development land anywhere?
Yeah.
I think we've got plans for the market towns, which I think you'll be pleased about, that sort of thing. And of course, Ross is an important element for us.
I agree, and I fully support that, leader, but it's no good leaving it until we're out. We've got to start thinking ahead and planning and putting things in place.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just on that point, you probably would have noticed, I'm sure, in the master plan draft, and if he goes and has another look, Councillor Matthews will see that we're looking at a business and an industrial or business sector similar to the enterprise zone in the west of Hereford in a corridor, Councillor Matthews, that may or may not include land that we've asked our major factories to explain to us what they need to do in 10, 15, 20 years, and if that land will become available. Those are active conversations, and we're looking very much in the master plan at a corridor in the west.
Will you be considering, Councillor Harrington and your colleagues, if you're still there or ever still there, smaller sites in some of our rural areas, rather than having it all in one place like Rotherham, putting it in the rural areas in our larger villages that can cope, so people can live near their work?
Well, I think Councillor Challenge's market town investment plans did exactly that. So they have identified areas that would support business and would support industry, because as you say, we would rather people were able to live and move around their own areas, give or take. So I'm sure that Councillor Childs might provide further on that, or we will certainly be able to discuss that.
Mr. Childs.
I think we've moved quite a long way from discussing the topic of the paper in front of us here. And I have, on numerous previous occasions, responded to Councillor Matthews on this topic. And in addition to the market town investment plans, of course, the allocation of employment land is dealt with through the revision of the core strategy, which is an ongoing process, and is very welcome to input into that as much as possible.
Yes, I was going to mention that it's sort of fitting together the master plan, the 2050 plan, the core strategy. We can be working, make sure everything is properly joined up, which is good. I'll move on then.
But with respect to you, I've got to keep reminding Councillor Childs unless you forget.
I don't need those reminders. That's in my case. Thank you.
We're joking, just to cheer you up.
So I'll move on then to Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, I mean, we note the report, and it's great to see Herefordshire Council taking decarbonisation seriously and developing integrated plans that actually will help us move forward into the kind of realities of this century, and come up with an integrated and holistic approach to transport. So yeah, we welcome it. Thank you.
Councillor Wilding.
Thanks, Leader. I'll just echo everything that Councillor Fagan had just said. I think it's good. Thank you.
And finally, going back to Councillor Lester. I don't know whether you're available now. You're on mute. And we can't see. No, I think we'll move on to the recommendation. The recommendations are set out in the report. Cabinet members, are you in favour? Thank you very much. So then item 10, which probably is Councillor Hampton again, but also Councillor Davis, because I think this is a really significant paper that's come before us today.
Can I speak, please, as the elected ward member of the enterprise zone and the Eastern Butt Crossing, which has been discussed at this meeting? Just a short statement, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, Councillor Summers, yeah.
I've just sat through a cabinet meeting that affects the enterprise zone and a potential Eastern Bridge. I have to say it is difficult to sit here and listen to a discussion regarding a ward I was elected to speak for. Very disappointed, all of you. Thank you.
I think Councillor Summers, you might have noticed that Councillor Milne spoke earlier on. He did write to me to ask if he could speak, and I said yes. Had you done the same to me, I would have included you in the discussion. Thank you. So moving on then to item 10, Councillor Harrington.
Yes, thank you, Leader. So the public realm contract. So obviously, when we came as administration, we inherited a public realm contract with our partner, Balfour Beatty Living Places. This was a 10-year contract starting in 2013, with possible extensions of up to 10 years. Up till, what would that make, 2033, I think, well, that's just right. When we came in, there were issues around whether or not we could demonstrate value for money, whether or not the contract was appropriate for Herefordshire, whether or not we might prefer in-house, whether or not we might prefer a different partner, whether, et cetera, after quite a lot of consideration, I think we've come to the conclusion that the contract itself was fine, and certainly our public realm contractor has worked hard with us. The issue we had in particular was that the nature of the contract was very, very broad, very comprehensive. So it was unusual for the contract to include such things as PROW, public rights of way, for example, to include things like traffic management, and for all our technical staff to have moved over from Herefordshire Council, or when anywhere capacity to employ them have moved over from Herefordshire Council into the public realm partners control, which is part of the deal. It was also very unfortunate that one of the conditions of accepting that contract in 2013 meant that the public realm contract in terms of basic revenue and yearly annual plan budget went down from 9 million to 6 million, which coincided with quite a lot of complaints and issues in our deteriorating network, and that must be very clearly understood. It is easy to blame the likes of Balfour Beatty, as people like to, when in actual fact a vast majority of the problems we're suffering are results of austerity. We cannot function with £100 million less in revenue a year. We cannot accept that that is going to remain the case. We have to look to be funded more fairly. However, coming back to the point in hand, what we have identified in this report is a sort of a hybrid that seems acceptable. Rather than change the contract enormously, what we would like to do is to bring back many of our technical staff, if not all of our technical staff, so our road and bridge engineers, our inspectors, our contract management team would come back into Herefordshire Council control over the next couple of years in agreement with our public realm partner and with agreement of the council members, or cabinet at least anyway, wherever we have standing in November. And I think this would be the best way to run the contract, similar to the contract that's run in Telford, where they produce, very often produce the plan themselves and give it to their public realm contractor to deliver. It means that we have a sight of, or we have certainly the impression, if not the reality, of control and direction on what we're doing, and we are able to direct our public realm partner to do precisely what we'd like to do. So I commend this report. I think it's a good thing to be taken forward. It is obviously not a decision, it's simply a decision to pursue this particular particular option and to give it, flesh it out with some more detail and to come back and make a decision in November. Make the best effort I could to make sure that all members of different political parties had input into this, because it's once again, for me, this is an operational thing rather than a political thing that we want to make sure we get right. I'll just finish by saying that our public realm contractor is a good contractor to work to. Our auditors said that they are a good civils company, and the issue is the nature of the contract, and that's what we need to get right.
Councillor Davies, do you want to comment on that as well?
Just a really brief one, just to say, firstly, this is part of a 4-year journey for us. It's really important that we give an update before the elections on how we've got to this point now. I want to really thank Councillor Harrington really for that introduction, which basically tells us exactly what our auditors did, which was that there was nothing essentially wrong with the contract. It's a good contract for the time that it was, but we are living in an entirely different world. If you look at some of the operating performance indicators and the key performance indicators, they're so out of tune with what the county plan is. And I really want to thank officers, both from within the council and also people at Balfour Beatty, really for their engagement in something like this. It's a big change to ask from big significant companies, but their openness and transparency to enter into these kind of discussions and to respectively say nothing's off the table is really welcomed by us. So long may that kind of partnership continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I think I'd sort of echo that. I think to have an adult conversation to explain the issues with the contract and to open the opportunities really makes a big difference. And it may well be reviewed again in another 4 or 5 years' time because things move on, but to have that continuing relationship, I think is really important. A lot of people out there are not very happy with the contract. Well, we're going to improve it so that instead of BBLP having perhaps a poor name, we want them to have a good reputation, which follows with us as a council. Councillor Crockett.
Thank you, Leader. I know the report mentions value for money several times, but what we need is quality for money as well. So please could I ask the Cabinet Member for reassurance that quality control checks will be included in this model? I understand you can't check every piece of work, but you know, a percentage of works are quality control checked, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Crockett. I think there have been issues with some projects in the past, and that's been up for our contractor to resolve those, and they have for the most part, and they are continuing to look at any that are outstanding. I think the important thing is that if we have our inspector service and our public ground, our engineers back in house, then we will be able to have the confidence that that we are inputting in the right time and making sure that we are providing assurance on quality. So I'm very confident that will make it a very tight and friendly but sufficiently tense contract arrangement between us and our partner.
Very much, Councillor Toynbee.
Yes, thank you. As has been said, I think we all know that there's always been a very strong public interest in our contract with Balfour Beatty, so I'm really pleased that this really thorough work has been done, and I think people will be reassured, and it's an ongoing process. Obviously, it's not a one-off thing that we're discussing our relationship and building on it and improving it. I'm always pleased to see reference to locality stewards. The locality steward in my ward is really visible, really responsive. The residents really appreciate him. I think the public very much like the idea of us having a closer relationship with the locality steward, with them working more directly with us and for the people. So that's really positive. And I'm also pleased to see a commitment to social value in here. Obviously, from the corporate parenting point of view, it's not just health and education who we need to think of. There's especially organisations like Hoople and Balfour Beatty, where we need to use our influence. We need to do more work on what corporate parenting means to our partners, what the opportunities are for them and for the young people in our care. So I'm really glad to see that in there, and we need to do more work on it. Thanks.
Councillor Davies.
Yeah, I'm really grateful, thanks to Toynbee, for bringing up social value in that particular area. That's been part and parcel of our ethos as an administration for the last 4 years. And social value is, Councillor Harrington and I often have arguments about social value.
Yeah, I want more and you don't.
Yeah. He always talks about the money. I always talk about social value. And he said, we should be focusing. I said we can focus on both. And what we have from BBLP, but also from some of the other major big hitters in all of our big contracts, is that desire to look at what can we do more above and beyond that contract. So it's not social value at the expense of them doing work, it's on top of, and they're becoming real experts on it. So we've already had these discussions around what would that social value look like, and I've said, from our perspective at the moment, we've got children's services in the condition that it is, and we're working on that improvement journey. How can they, as a partner, and this is the same for every single partner that we've got in major contracts, how can they be part of that journey? Because it's their responsibility as well. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because it's been something that I know officers have been pushing for as well.
Councillor Jones.
Thanks, yeah. I think, as Diana said, the contract with Balfour Beatty is an issue of real kind of concern and interest to our residents. I think we all recognise that and experience that in our own areas, and therefore it's a real concern for us as ward councillors. I think this report really sets out an improvement in the direction of travel, a very clear improvement. As it says, it will give the council an increased ability to own, to check and to challenge the works that Balfour Beatty delivers on our behalf. And I think it recognises that hasn't enough been the case in the past, and we're changing that. We're working to better oversee and supervise and improve those works on behalf of our residents by taking forward this new operating model. So I think that's very much to be welcomed. It, by itself, it doesn't fix everything at all, but it will give us that ability to check and challenge more. And I think that's really important, and something we're going to have to keep on working on, on a day-to-day basis in our relationship with our contractors.
Good, thank you very much. So, Councillor James.
Thank you, Leo. I think a small step in the right direction, but I'd like to see further to bring back in-house responsibilities. There is no doubt that the cost of the BD of individual projects is high compared to what local contractors and builders would do the same work for. I know in one case, but I can go back to Amy, so that, I won't like sort of black and bulbers, but the contractor for doing a specific task would be paying 40% of what Amy would be charging the council. They were using administration, etc., to do that. And it is not responsible. The public have seen it so often. The lack of supervision and much work that goes on through there. I think, given instances I've seen with my own eyes, and we are actually paying for that inefficiency. We have to make them more accountable. And we have to make sure that on individual projects, we know what that is costing. I could guarantee that you could do, for instance, potholes at a fraction of the cost with local contractors, local businesses in the county. But that option doesn't exist in the current regime. But I welcome that there is a move in the right direction of bringing certain things in, being more accountable.
Councillor Davies.
Got worried that way. Just a quick one, just to confirm here. Actually, the Balfour Beatty contract, when we had Social Value come in to look at the contract in year 1 to 2019 to 2020, said that they were one of their experience of one of the biggest contracts to use substantial local suppliers to do the works. I think it's about 65–70%. So actually, if we're looking at the supplies, etc., actually we do have a really good local community that are taking part on it. I wish it was more, and I hope that this flexibility within the contract now and what we're working towards will allow that. And I know Councillor Harrington will probably want to come in to talk about actually what are the things that we can give to the community. Can we pay the community to do some of those roles? Because I actually think that is the way in which Herefordshire could operate best. But I'm sure Councillor Harrington will want to talk about that.
Well, I wasn't so sure I wanted to talk about it, but I mean that is a good point. I mean, obviously, if we have, well, the reality is, if we modify the contract in this way, we have to take some risk back, because that is what our partner takes at the moment. They take the risk. So yes, if we take the risk back, we're able to give more, perhaps more ability for local parish councils to do something almost like an enhanced lensman, where we might even say to them, in a way of trying to control our budgets, or trying to eke out our budgets, I should say, which will reduce. And just for factual detail, I think we had about £15 million a year to spend on the annual plan in 2011, 9 million up to 2012, and 6 million from 2013 onwards, and it's probably around about 5.5 now. So that is the real struggle that we've always got to try and work out. And until we get that funding back, anyone who does the job is going to get some criticism. But what we could do, because we own more risk, is look at doing some of the smaller jobs differently, which our partners can't get to at the moment.
Yes, I think Councillor James, it is moving in the right direction. It's a matter of weighing up how much further we can go. We decided this is the appropriate way of doing it, and maybe in a few years' time, as I say, it may change again. I'll pass on then to Councillor Lester. Are you back with us?
Yes, apologies. I had to nip out for a second there, so apologies, and I note the comment of the last item. But yes, from a Conservative group's point of view, making sure there's a contract with that greater flexibility and the ability to monitor the works of any contractor and judge the quality of works is really important. And so we welcome the change, and we hope that this will give a refreshed view about how the contract works and the provision of the service, which is critical for Herefordshire. So we will look forward to that being rolled out accordingly, and look forward to working with our partners. but this matter was also taken to the the Connected Communities Scrutiny Committee, and we had 2 sessions at this, and Councillor Harrington and Councillor Davis were very patient while we went through our queries and questions and our recommendations. And I just note today the executive response to those recommendations. Obviously, the committee were really keen to ensure that there was greater communication between the 2 services, or the client and the service provider, to make sure that everyone was clear as to who's responsible for what, and also the communication with regard to potholes and how members of the public can raise questions. And I particularly remember mentioning about the role that parish councils would play in that. And I note the executive response, but we felt that communication was absolutely the key for members of the public understanding how this service is delivered. The committee were also really keen to ensure that how contracts are awarded, doesn't necessarily have to be with the main provider, it can be with other contractors, and that's an assurance that we've received, because obviously people are thinking, members of the public thinking smaller contracts could be awarded to others as long as it's gone through the right procurement program. And so if that's a flexible arrangement that's built into this contract, then that's something that we welcome. There was also talk in both of the scrutiny committees about making sure there's that flexibility for Herefordshire Council to explore ways in which it could earn money from doing projects. And so I note that there's the executive response includes the provision to explore the potential for the council to do works themselves where it could be a source of income generation. I think it's very much work in progress, but we note that progress. We note the fact that times change, and so contracts have to change, and we will endeavour to see how this plays out. But I think getting that balance right is absolutely critical here, and this is a step in that direction. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, Councillor Lester is quite right. Getting the balance right is absolutely vital. Most of it is said, Leader. I agree with taking some of the services where apparent back into our control, but there is a risk element with that, so we've always got to make sure that we can provide that service more cost effective. And I think Councillor Crockett raised a very valuable point. It's the quality of work that they're providing as well as the value for work. So they pop along and some of their work is pretty shoddy, so that's a very important thing to make sure that that's carried out. But I think most everything else is being said. I fully agree with what's been proposed, including if our local contractors could be given more work as well. I think that could be very valid and valuable money.
Thank you, Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. So the Greens, they support this development. I would just like to reiterate what Councillor Lester said about communication. I think communication is going to be absolutely key to a sort of more seamless transition, and also just ensuring that the kind of workforce, as in the workforce that are affected by transitions sort of between Balfour Beatty and the council, that they are sort of well supported in that. I know that the transfer for the public rights of way wasn't necessarily seamless, and parish councils really struggled with that. And so hopefully sort of what's coming in the future will be sort of a little bit more sort of considered and a little bit less bumpy, so that we can actually ensure that the services continue to be delivered for residents. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilding.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, we support the views expressed by Councillor Harrington, and think that the hybrid approach is a good idea.
Thank you very much. So no ado, we'll move on to the recommendations which are set out in the report. Cabinet members, all in favour? Thank you. So moving on then to item 11. There are some really significant items. Everything, I think, is a significant item on today's agenda. This is another one which is of great public interest. How we spend and deliver monies on Section 106 has been a bit of a grey area. I don't think people really know what's going on. So hopefully this is an opportunity to explain a little bit more about it. So Councillor Harvey, over to you.
I was going to let Councillor Hamilton do it.
I was about to say, do you want to do it?
Yeah, well, you might want to rest your voice.
Okay. Right, so this report is seeking to place the 4.69 million of Section 106 funding received by the council over the last 12 months or so into a project development pipeline so that the mitigating investments in community infrastructure and the transport network improvements can be made. In November 2021, Cabinet approved the procurement and delivery of proposals for expenditure of 9.3 million of Section 106 income. And this is the next tranche of funding which needs to be translated into improved schemes and services for local people. Responsibility is recommended to be delegated to our directors to oversee the detailed development of delivery plans for their areas of responsibility, and I commend the report to Cabinet colleagues.
Councillor Davies.
Yes, thanks for that. This is probably a moot point, but within the delegation is that we've got public art, which has 0, which is no great shock to me. But we've got 0 at the moment for public art, but it's underneath an officer that isn't to do with culture. And I'm really concerned when that happens, because public art isn't about just throwing up a nice, shiny sculpture. It's about being part of a strategic oversight and working with the right people in order to spend the money, and it should be linked to our cultural partnership. So I just wondered, from a delegation perspective, are we able to change that to the to Amy Pitt, who is the service director for culture? And I just wondered, I know there's no money at the moment, but it's just a point that I hope we could change. It didn't make sense to me. Yeah. Brilliant, thank you.
Councillor Chance.
Thanks. I know that expenditure of Section 106 money is of real interest to communities in areas that are affected by the developments that generate the Section 106 commitments. So I wonder, Councillor Harvey, if you could just say a bit more about how we will improve the communication with communities and the consultation on how Section 106 contributions are spent, and improve the transparency of information about that, potentially via the website and other mechanisms.
Yes, the gestation of Section 106 is a long one, and it starts with the local plan and the way in which we draft our planning policies, particularly the ones that are shaping, they're very specific to localities. When at that time, where there are strategic housing sites coming forward, part of the planning process is associated with thinking through what the significant pieces of community infrastructure are that need to be invested in order to mitigate the impact of those developments. Now, the local plan is going through an update process at the moment, and there have been a number of rounds of public consultation associated with that, which have also involved parish councils and other groups, and that will continue. So I would encourage people who are maybe concerned that the existing planning policy framework that we have isn't delivering the kind of development that you would like to see. Please do get involved and take part in those consultations. It's possible to register on the council website for alerts, so that you don't have to keep looking at the website. You can be told when the consultations are coming up, and that get emailed through to you. So please do get involved, because that's a really important part of the process, as it is with parish councils getting involved in shaping those planning policies at that point in the process. Nearer to that, we have neighbourhood planning, where bottom-up planning goes on at a more detailed level in our communities. And again, where there is a requirement, there is a seen need for improved community infrastructure, the neighbourhood planning process is another way in which that those needs can be recognised and then can become part of the planning policy framework that is used by planners when planning applications come forward to help identify what additional community infrastructure might be needed through 106 agreements. When it comes to individual planning applications themselves, there is a public consultation process whereby members of the public and statutory consultees are asked to comment on planning applications, and what is referred to as a draft heads of terms is put together, which outlines what the contributions are that a developer is expected to make when bringing forward the development to mitigate that specific development, which could be a big one, but it could be quite a little one in a village. What we're trying to do at the moment is to also make an application to government for the majority of our parishes to be designated as rural, which will help with lowering the requirement for the number of houses to be built before we can have things like affordable housing, which, although it's not Section 106, is an important part of community infrastructure that we need to help to deliver so that people can have affordable homes in our communities. So the heads of terms is published, and it should be published in draft and made available. Also, it should be consulted with ward members on, so that ward members are made available, are made aware of what the draft heads of terms is talking about. Parish councils can also update what's called their Section 106 wish lists with planners. And so those are in addition to neighbourhood plans, which might be developed every 10 years or so. So more frequently than that, if a community need emerges, then updating your parish Section 106 list is another way of alerting planners to an infrastructure need in the event that that can be satisfied if an appropriate development comes forward within the vicinity. And then, of course, there is the legal agreement that's drawn up once a planning permission is granted, and that should set out in legal terms and be sealed by the signature of all parties as to what precisely a developer is going to be making in terms of contributions for community infrastructure and changes to the road transport network associated with our development. And it's kind of at all of those points that Section 106 can be influenced. In the detail of the delivery of Section 106, which is what we're talking about here, most of the monies that are paid over by developers have been agreed in legal terms as to what they're going to be spent on. How those projects actually come forward do get consulted on with parish councils and should also be consulted on with ward members as well. And I know that Councillor Harrington has been involved in lots of discussions to do with transport related 106 funded schemes. So that is going on. One of the projects that we've had going during this administration is really pulling together an end-to-end joined up approach to the way that 106 is strategised, is consulted on with developers, is agreed with planners, and then is delivered with our service areas. And I'm really hopeful that that will mean that we'll be able to deliver infrastructure alongside development coming forward rather than in arrears. In fact, we've even changed our finance regulations so that we can help to pull funding forward to enable developments to be part funded by borrowing and then paid back when we get the funding paid through in instalments from developers. So that's another way in which we're trying to improve the way in which infrastructure comes forward more swiftly. Oh, and good news, actually, I had an email today from our 106 team saying that the web pages on the council website to do with Section 106 have actually been improved, and there's been an update to those. So they are actually showing more information about Section 106, and hopefully they will be easier on the eye than they have been, because they've been a bit of a struggle. So all feedback on that, welcome. I'm sure we can do better still. That's an interim improvement.
Can I just come in, Councillor Harvey, just to answer that question there that you mentioned. So it's the search facility that has come online. It's live as of yesterday. So any councillor, any ward member, parish member of the public would be able to search the Section 106 facility in the area. And it's the search facility which is now live. The section of the website has not been fully updated yet, but is being changed as we speak. So you will get an email when that Section 106 information part of the website is updated. So phase 1 is done with the search facility, which will give everyone much more oversight of Section 106 agreements going forward. The website itself is still in production. I was just because Councillor Harvey said it was up and running. It's not quite up and running, but in the coming weeks you'll receive another email to say it is up and running. But the search facility on the website is live and up and running. Sorry, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thanks for that correction. I don't want to sort of overpromise on that. We've all been waiting. We've got to wait a little bit longer, but only a little bit.
Councillor Chowers.
Thanks. Yeah, sorry, I perhaps should have been clearer with my question. So one of my questions was about the website, and having a look at it now, it is much clearer than it was a day ago. That's very helpful. I think there are ways it could be improved further, and I'll input to colleagues regarding that in terms of identifying where money is allocated or where there are proposals for allocation of funding. The first part of my question was really about the interaction with parish councils and being more proactive in asking parish councils to generate and update their wish list and being more transparent about what those wish lists are. This is arising from, an issue in my ward, and I can see nods around the room for others. So doesn't need a specific response now, but it's a request for better consultation with parish councils to be included in the improved process for delivery of Section 106 expenditure going forward.
Okay, yeah, happy to look at that.
Councillor Harrington.
Well, it's trying to silence me.
Finally. Just turn the battery down.
You can talk, literally.
I can.
Metaphorically. Just on that point, because I think it's important to remember that we want parishes to tell us what they would like, but the responsibility, the risk, and lies with the county council, the highways department, the education department. So we probably have abdicated that responsibility a little bit in the past, and I think the reason why that is, particularly in my portfolio of highways and transport, is that we had a public realm contractor who was acting as our technical services, but was also potentially bidding for capital works. And I think that created a little bit of a grey area, and I think our contractors were very careful not to muddy the waters there. So perhaps we hadn't had the technical services on our side, partly because we sent them all over to Alpha BT in 2003 to maintain that interaction properly. So we want responses from parish councils, but they must remember that we have to have the responsibility for whatever schemes are agreed, and also what we think as a county council is needed is paramount.
Thank you. I think I wanted to move on as quickly as possible, really. Councillor
Yeah, just a quick one, Leader. One thing that I've requested in the past is whether parish councils can be actually allocated some 106 money once they've identified the project and had it costed. So I just think that they would feel beneficial if that could be done, so that they can have control on that money. Sorry, he's just looking at me like, no.
That'll be looked at by Councillor Harrington and officers to see whether. I'm joking. Okay, I think we'll move on. So going around the group leaders again, Councillor James.
Thank you, John. Can I just say I agree with what Councillor Harrington said? We must remember that this is the county council's responsibility. And, you know, there seems to be an idea that it's gained within some of the parishes. It's some money that's given that they can go and spend on something that they like, whether it relates to the planning application or the planning process at all. You know, it has to be clearly relating to the actual project that has generated the area. And it's for this council to make those decisions, not for the parishes, but you can take on board what they want. I mean, some of the suggestions I've heard from parish councils bear no relation whatsoever with the planning application that generated the monies. So, you know, it will cause so much bad feeling, I think, if we say, oh, well, we want a vision, we don't do it. And so much of it is anyway sort of obviously allocated to education because of those sort of implications, etc. There isn't that much discretionary. But the most important thing is all spend it. We've had years and years of this money backing up, and inflation has turned it in. We've got, in one particular case, in my area, my ward, we've actually, in real terms, only been able to use 60% of it. I don't mean that we had to spend it back, but inflation has eaten into what the costs. And, you know, 10%, if we keep the monies 1 year, that's 90% the next year, and it's less and less as years go by. So get on and spend it quickly.
Yes, I think we're trying to, we are doing that. Councillor Lester?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I look at our Conservative notes, and it just says just get on with it. But no, the point I would make on behalf of the Conservative group is that obviously 106 agreements affect local communities, and there is this expectation out there that parish councils are looked to provide the reasons and the rationale for having 106 agreements and how that money is spent. And so whilst we all know that parish councils are not responsible for how that money gets spent, they play a large and important role in that. And yes, we would really like to see these projects being rolled out and the 106 money being spent. But the plea is, and I know I experienced this myself in the communities that I represent, is the project management teams in rolling out these projects. Please take these communities, not always parish councils, but primarily parish councils, please take these parish councils with them on this journey of delivery, because otherwise there is the opportunity for wires to be crossed, parish councils to think certain things would happen when they don't actually happen, and those cross wires can then lead to the perception of false promises or a community thinking it's going to get something when it might not necessarily be the case. So it's all about the project and delivery, but as it with all things, it's all about that communication. And so that's absolutely key, not only in accruing all the ideas about what a community wants, but when those projects get delivered, or when they're in discussion about how they're going to get delivered or what's being delivered, it's really important to engage communities, and in particular parish councils, which is always my plea, but it would be our group's plea as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matthews has needs to go. So Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, so the Greens obviously welcome this improvement in the 106 delivery, making it more efficient and more transparent. Welcome the involvement of the project management office. The website, I haven't actually seen it, but it does sound like again another improvement. I think a lot of the parishes certainly that I represent have found the 106 quite confusing. There's a lot of misconception about it, sort of where the money goes. And I think one of the difficulties also is that for those parishes that have experienced a huge growth in housing development, but it's been in smaller chunks that don't actually qualify for 106, and they feel that the impact of the developments on their communities has been huge, but there's no actual benefit seen from that. I mean, I realize that this isn't covered by that, but I think greater communication with parishes about this and how it works is certainly to be welcomed. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Harvey just wanted to make a few comments.
Yeah, just really on the point that Councillor Fagan raised about small developments not generating Section 106. Of course, that's one of the reasons both why neighbourhood planning is really important and why those community conversations about the merits and demerits of taking a larger scale development or trying to satisfy the sort of growth demands in your community with a single development versus a number of smaller ones are so important. I know that there are many communities which have opted to have several smaller developments rather than one bigger one because it is better, those smaller developments are better fitted to the nature of their community, and they felt that a bigger development would be more damaging. And that's a very valid thought process to have gone through. One of the reasons why we're looking to get the rural designation applied for is so that some of those developments can be smaller and still qualify for certain sorts of developer contribution and affordable housing target, and I'm hoping that both of our MPs will support that application when they get to it in their inboxes.
Thank you. So, Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I think everything's been said and we support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll go straight to the recommendations which are set out in the report. Cabinet members, are you in favour? Thank you very much. So next item is item 12. I wondered whether we needed a short break or short break probably for 10 minutes. That's all right.
We're live again, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 12. This is Cabinet Commission conclusions, and the report seeks to update the Cabinet on the progress made by the Commission and make some recommendations. Over to you, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. So in the summer of last year, Cabinet committed to the creation of a commission with the aim to develop a strategic plan to restore the River Wye catchment to favourable conservation status. And the terms of reference for the Commission covered objectives relating to the Nutrient Management Plan and its Delivery Board, farming and agriculture and its supply chains, relevant national and local policy frameworks. And we were joined in this endeavour by the other 3 local authorities having responsibility for parts of the Wye catchment. And the Commission had its first meeting in October of last year. Since then, the Commission has met on 3 further occasions to receive evidence and information from experts and to discuss progress reports from officers progressing the Commission's objectives with government departments, agencies and regulatory bodies on both sides of the English-Welsh border, and also with catchment MPs and ministers. As set out in its terms of reference, this report seeks to provide a March update to Cabinet on the progress on some of the Commission's work strands and presents the case for progressing exploration of more robust monitoring and regulatory options for river restoration, with the proposal that a further progress report be made to Cabinet in July. Since 2014, the mechanism by which the condition of the river has been managed is that of a nutrient management plan, the delivery of which has been overseen and monitored by a delivery board, including representatives from statutory agencies and the catchment local authorities. However, the view is that insufficient progress has been capable of being made through this approach, and the delivery board itself needs strengthening. The report recommends that a newly reconstructed nutrient management plan delivery board be proposed and that the current nutrient management plan be significantly revised. Recognising that the current approach to managing the condition of the river is inadequate, it is important that an improvement upon that approach is also developed. This Council has already unanimously voted for the Secretary of State at DEFRA to be petitioned for the implementation of a full water protection zone for the Wye, and the Secretary of State has refused that request as being premature and without required justification. Consequently, it is necessary to make progress by other means, whilst working with partners, agencies, regulators and stakeholders to build a robust case for a more regulated and rigorous scheme or set of mechanisms that will meet the requirement to deliver nutrient certainty for our river. The report sets out that there are options which show potential to achieve such certainty, and the next step, moving up a staircase of increasing regulation and monitoring, is to explore, amongst other things, whether there is a willingness and a commitment for all stakeholders and agencies to work to achieve a regulated voluntary scheme, which is compliant with statutory requirements. The report proposes these are explored before progressing to anything more authoritarian. We know such collaborative schemes are feasible. A scheme to manage down the nitrogen loading in the Poole Harbour Basin has received consent, and that they continue to retain the regulatory threat of a WPZ, that's a water protection zone, should the necessary progress not be made through cooperation. Exploring whether a voluntary scheme with regulatory oversight to address the wide catchments pollution issues is a logical next step. In exploring this, it will be important to keep other and newly emerging options also under review, and the proposed 5-step business case process used by government will require that we do such an options appraisal as part of moving forward any such case to government. In an ideal world, government departments, agencies and regulators would be fulfilling their statutory responsibilities and the river would be in sparkling good health. We have all been failed by the system, and pragmatically we need to recognise that it is Herefordshire, its communities, its environment, its economy, which is being damaged daily in the many and various ways by the pollution of the river for our section of the catchment. This impacts in multiple areas of the Council's operation and responsibility, as well as the daily and working lives of many people. As an example, the local economy has lost more than £350 million in turnover in the development sector alone, and that impacts onwards on the many local businesses relying on the spending that such jobs create. It also impacts on the people wanting new and affordable homes and on the vital frontline council services through lost revenue from council tax, estimated at more than £1.7 million a year and counting at the moment. It is essential that we maintain the momentum for real progress for all who have a part to play in resolving legacy and future pollution issues. In making these recommendations, there is no suggestion that this council is to fund a scheme for farmers. What we are proposing is that we continue to work closely with government and agencies, and where it contributes to the acceleration of a solution for the Wye, we make some contribution to the work that needs to be done to put a better scheme in place. Paragraph 57 of the report indicates the sort of work which we think needs to be done, and meetings are already offered by the Environment Agency with ourselves and others to scope out who is best placed to lead on these and other activities which need to be done to fill the essential gaps in evidence to understand the problem and its sources, which is an important next step all agree needs to be done. Ultimately, we all want to see the achievement of a strong regulatory framework certain to deliver river restoration. In working to accelerate the achievement of this, the Council has never suggested that it should assume any powers belonging rightfully to the regulators or to any other of the statutory bodies. However, we do and shall continue to encourage and challenge government and the regulators to exercise their statutory powers to their full extent. In summary, I would like to thank all the citizen science, river friends, environmental protection, concerned citizen and campaigning groups for the interest that they continue to show in the restoration of the river and their ideas and suggestions for how to speed its achievement. This report is not proposing anything extraordinary or unreasonable. It is proposing moving to the next logical step and continuing to do that with all partners and agencies in collaboration with our farming and business communities. This report is a difficult one to write to satisfy all facets of its likely audience. I think we have work to do to learn the lessons from this report in better meeting the desire for detail from our wide stakeholder community in the future reports and communications we provide on the work of the Commission. The report recommends that what is presently being done to protect the river is just not good enough and proposes that further work is done to explore whether more regulated options are feasible and deliverable, including as a particular solution, a regulated voluntary scheme across the wide catchment farming community. I understand that progressing a water protection zone is the preferred approach for some. However, a water protection zone cannot be the preferred option for us right now, unless and until we have explored and dismissed the reasonable alternatives. That said, a WPZ will continue to remain an option, and the work undertaken over the next 4 months will contribute to the base data required to make the case for such a strongly regulated solution, should a water protection zone prove to be the only way forward. Further progress on the wider objections of the Commission and specifically the recommendations outlined in this report will come to a new Cabinet in July.
Thank you, Councillor Hardy. Anybody want to comment? Councillor Jones, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey, thank you, colleagues. I very much welcome the cross-border and multi-authority work of the Cabinet Commission and very much want to see this continue, and I'd like to thank Liz and Councillor Harvey and all of the other commissioners for their hard work on this and their engagement. I'm pleased that the work will continue and very much look forward to seeing further progress from it. I also absolutely recognise the need to work together in partnership with farmers to find a solution to the pollution issues, given the fact that the majority of the pollution is from diffuse agricultural sources, and that absolutely does need to be a partnership. And I think myself and Councillor Harvey share a concern to get a solution that will deliver certainty as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, I don't feel that the approach outlined in this paper is the best way to do that. I rather regret that this report, which has the explicit purpose of establishing a phosphate trading scheme, has been brought to Cabinet before the Cabinet Commission has been able to publish any report on its work. And so I feel that this proposal is somewhat premature. So unfortunately, I don't feel able to support the report because of the lack of output from the Cabinet Commission means that it's not clear on what basis the report states that the Cabinet Commission has concluded in favour of establishing a phosphate trading scheme. The proposal for a phosphate trading scheme is for another voluntary scheme, and we have had 9 years of voluntary effort, and things have got worse for the rivers, not better. I rather regret that we haven't seen evidence of key stakeholders' commitment to the proposal here, whether that be financial commitment or written commitment. And I think that would be very, very helpful going forward. I'd warmly welcome those commitments. I do feel, having looked into this in quite a lot of detail, the paper is actually proposing something quite different to what happened in Poole Harbour. In Poole Harbour, it was actually the credible prospect of a water protection zone that incentivised the polluters to develop a water quality trading scheme. And it was crucially the farmers who led and owned and are leading and owning the trading scheme, and that crucial sort of division of responsibility between, on the one hand, the regulatory agencies, the Environment Agency and Natural England, in setting a regulatory framework that incentivises the development of a trading scheme by those who are most affected by it, most invested in participating in it. I think that it would be most helpful. I think that is a helpful model, and I would like to see us work within that framework. So in my view, we should be investing the money that I'm pleased we have set aside as a council to work on progressing a solution to the phosphates issue. I feel that we should be investing that in preparing a fully argued, scientifically based case for a water protection zone as per the unanimous council resolution we had a year ago, in order to ensure that the regulatory authorities fulfil their responsibilities, their legal responsibilities, and deliver the regulatory pressure that will be necessary to incentivise development of schemes to resolve the pollution crisis that we have in our rivers. Having laid out that we have, a difference of opinion within the Cabinet on this, I'm absolutely committed to continuing to work really constructively with colleagues to develop the work going forward, to ensure that there's as much synergy as possible between what is set out in this paper and what I feel would be optimal. And I think that, the fact that we may have a disagreement within the coalition, if anything, highlights the strength of the coalition. We can disagree on some things, but we can still work together constructively and cooperatively going forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Chowns. We're all seeking the same objective, isn't it? Aren't we? Which is the restoration of the River Wye, with a slight difference on how we might achieve that. Councillor Harrington, I don't know whether you wanted to speak.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and thank you everyone for their comments. And obviously, there's been a lot of conversations over the last few days about this. It's a difficult subject to sort of consider. The point of view I think I come from is that we're not, as a council, responsible for the protection of the rivers. It's a shame we're not. We might be able to do things more quickly. And it's been a great shame that our government has not been protecting our rivers in the way it should be, and it's defunded, quite frankly, the EA, Natural England, and to a slightly lesser degree, Natural Resources Wales. It's also extremely unfortunate that until we came in as administration, we weren't even having conversations with people in Powys or Monmouthshire, and now in Forest Dean, when we know full well that a river doesn't pay any attention to a border. It was a farcical situation to have. So I'm very grateful for that joint working that we've done, Councillor Chowns, Councillor Harvey, with Powys Council, and now with Monmouthshire and with Forest Dean, is making a difference, because the Nutrient Management Board, quite frankly, and the plan was not fit for purpose. It was conceived in about 2014, around about the time that we got a big push on applications for intensive poultry units in the county, and it didn't have any teeth, and in many ways it continues not to have any teeth. And I suppose the idea for the Cabinet Commission was to have executive members from the four councils, in a position to work more effectively together to really pressurise the government, which is not doing its job. We have our MPs on board. We didn't always necessarily, and we're not necessarily sure that they're focused as hard on this subject as we wish them to be. And I suppose it comes back to this point in relation as well to the way that we have developed the wetlands. We don't have a responsibility for this, but do we have a moral or a public good or a public interest responsibility to try and do something? We decided that it was something we should try and do in relation to the mechanism for trading credits on the wetlands, which was by removing excess or all phosphate from sewage discharge and being able to use that improvement and actually betterment, because we agreed to give betterment to the river, to allow developers who are struggling to build in the north of the county in that catchment area, and the huge cost it's having on those businesses. I appreciate Councillor Chow's and other people's concern that we rushing towards a kind of pre-made decision. I don't think we are, and I certainly couldn't support that, and perhaps the report isn't written in the way that, as Councillor Harvey said, it might best have been written. I've taken the view that I will support this on the basis that we will come back for a review in July, and on the basis that the money that we will commit will be doing things that we need to do anyway. So we are all agreed the Nutrient Management Board needs to be reviewed and refined. We all agree that the plan needs to be reviewed and refined. So that resource will not be wasted. I think exploring the other options is something that needs to be done, and I believe that will be done. And I just ask that is done with as much kind of consideration as the kind of, in a sense, preferred option. And I also ask, because it's a comment that's come through to us, and I don't know if it's necessarily true or not, that as well as working with the natural partners within this scheme, which are, in a sense, you know, the landowners, we also work with, you know, environmental groups who have had to carry an awful lot of the heavy load on this, and I would very much welcome if they were in the circle with us to be able to have those grown-up conversations and to be able to make sure that we are doing what we should do. So it just comes back to this point about we can't rely on the government to do its job at the moment. We don't want to punish individual farmers because, quite frankly, it's not their fault. You can't help a farmer for taking a contract to produce poultry for a big company because they are doing what they're legally allowed to do. And even the discharging of their manure was legally and is still legally allowed, as long as, you know, so the issue has come from a lack of oversight, quite frankly, from the council in the past. Through our planning process, we should probably have been looking at cumulative impact a lot earlier, and it's something that we are changing and looking at. And secondly, the government has not done its job. And thirdly, the big producers have to have their responsibility in this endeavour. You know, they are, quite frankly, very much responsible for the situation that we find ourselves in. And I very much hope that, as well as being partners in this, there will be talk about how to restitute and provide some resource back to the situation that we found ourselves in. So it's not a great situation, but I'm content that we have a review in July, and on that basis, I will be supporting it.
Councillor Toynbee.
Yes, thank you. I'm very grateful as well for all the work that's been done on this, and I completely support our vision and our investment decisions. We all agree, we all want to reduce pollution and restore our rivers. We're determined to do something about that. We all share the frustration that we don't have the powers and the resources that we would like, and that's why this takes so long and it's so frustrating. We all want to explore options, we all want to monitor progress. We agree on the ends, but I do have some reservations about the means. For me, the question here is about the recommendations that we have before us, exactly what we're voting on, what our relationship is with the Cabinet Commission, which is still in its early days. What are Commission decisions? What are Cabinet decisions? The report mentions recommendations from the Commission, but I would like to hear directly from the Commission. I don't want to make any assumptions. I don't want to jump the gun. I don't want to commit prematurely to any particular course of action. In the introductory purpose paragraph in this item, and repeatedly in the body of the report, there is reference to developing, not merely exploring, developing a phosphate trading scheme. But there is no mention of this in the recommendations before us. I'm afraid this means that there is not enough clarity for me on what we're voting for. This work is not just about us as a council, it's about the wide range of partners that we're engaging with, and that I'm very pleased have been brought together. And our relationship with them is extremely important to me. It's a priority. for me. This isn't just about us as a council, it's about all of us. And I'm very much looking forward to future relationships, strengthening, and to updates being brought back to Cabinet in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other observations, questions? I think, Councillor Harvey, there's an interesting comment that Councillor Toynbee made about the introductory paragraph, purpose paragraph referring to the foster late training scheme, but that's not specifically referred to in the recommendations. So I'm right in thinking it isn't part of the recommendations that we go for that, is it?
It is one of the options that need to be explored.
Yeah.
And in terms of the, an increasing staircase of monitoring and regulation, it is the next sort of step up. But there are likely to be other options that will be emerging over the next few months, potentially as a consequence of understanding what may be being proposed for other polluted river systems that we may wish to reflect on in terms of whether they have relevance, whether those solutions have relevance over here. So I think what we're doing is keeping the options under review that are both in place now and emerging over the next 4 months, and we'll come back with an update. I don't, given the amount of work that needs to be done, I don't anticipate that there's going to be anything presented in 4 months' time that will be, sort of wrapped up with a bow and presented as a sort of signed, sealed and delivered solution. It will be a further progress report, but I'm hoping very much we'll be able to get a sense in that time frame as to whether working in collaboration and developing a consensus on voluntary action, even in the context of updating the nutrient management plan so that it can take through the board more hard-hitting actions than it has previously been able to do, with the backing of the regulators, the agencies, and with funding behind those actions to actually turn them into a reality. I think that's what I'm expecting we'll be able to get some crystallisation on over the next 4 months.
Okay. As far as I'm concerned, I'm supportive of this proposal. I think we've had some good consultation going on. Perhaps what's been revealed by the paper coming out in the comments is that perhaps we haven't been as wide as we might have been. So actually getting this paper's enabled a bigger audience to be involved, so we can work with them. I'm quite interested to see more about the pool system and how that actually works, what works well, what doesn't work well. And of course, even in that case, there isn't a WPZ at the moment. There's one maybe down the line, but kind of who knows what might be ahead. But certainly some learnings from the pool system we can find out. We as an administration we've tried to reach out to a broad spectrum of people to make contact in all sorts of ways with farmers, with the voluntary sector in a better way, I think. So this is just another example of how sort of reaching out, hopefully, to them. As you've said, you acknowledge it's not a perfect paper, but I think hopefully we've learned lessons and we can move forward. So I'll be supporting it. I don't know whether anybody else needs to add any comment. No. Okay. So it goes then to comments from any group leaders. Councillor James has left. Councillor Matthews. Councillor Lester.
Yes, thank you for that. Well, the purpose of a cabinet report is obviously to make a decision. It feels like this decision is trying to find its way without actually having a comprehensive approach to dealing with what is actually going to be the reality. The river pollution and the phosphates issue is such a pressing issue, we appreciate why there's movement on this and trying to get some resolution in the way forward. But I think the problem we fear is that feeling your way through this process, through this report, where I have to say, I'm not really clear on where we are, it's going and the outcomes, it feels as though it could have done with greater reflection, greater consultation, and just provide greater clarity, because at this stage it's saying, well, we're thinking about doing this, but we might, if this doesn't happen, we might be doing that. And I think there's going to be a lot of communities, farmers, and people involved in the environment who are not clear on which direction the council's going to go in. And I think that there could be important consequences for buying credits, but there needs to be greater clarity on what that would entail, how much that is going to be in comparison to the housing industry, and how well the credit system for the housing industry is going. And I think greater clarity needs to be put into the report about establishing milestones. Well, how would you establish those milestones? And unless they're evidence-based and there's a rationale for showing that evidence-based, then to threaten the next situation with protection is something that, again, there's not enough clarity, we feel, on that particular matter. And I also think that it's really important to state about what the council is actually doing to address the phosphates issue itself, and what projects is it promoting, perhaps through the planning system, to show that there will be solutions that the private sector or farmers or other people who live and work in Herefordshire can provide solutions to this problem. And it would help if that was publicised about what this council was actually doing about that. And also there are initiatives that actually remove phosphate altogether, and what is done to capture that information so that we can be certain about what improvements are happening before we expect others to toe the line on initiatives that, if they don't comply with, then it'll only get worse. So, I understand the reservations of cabinet members, and I respect the fact that they would agree to disagree with one another, but there's just I think the situation here is that it's just a little too premature without everything being locked down, and obviously more consultation needs to happen, because this is an issue that the county needs locking down, and it's a cross-border issue, as Councillor Harrington says. So I think the whole process needs rebooted, and this report needs rewriting with greater clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Harvey to reply perhaps after we've had the other group leaders. Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. While everybody understands that sort of the frustrations of us not being able to move forward on this really important issue, and it's not only important to Herefordshire or to Powys, it's actually nationally important. What happens with the River Wye. The report is very frustrating. It's a difficult to read report. It could have benefited from an executive summary, and it's lacking in actual proper detail, and the consultation on it has not been great. So it's we finding it very difficult. I think the fact that the report is also focusing on a phosphate trading scheme and is looking at pool sort of raises a whole lot of issues, because the pool situation is very, very different to the River Wye situation. It's a far smaller area, doesn't cross borders. It's also looking at nitrates and not phosphates, and the legacy phosphates, that situation that we have in Herefordshire. One of the comments from the CPRE, the English CPRE, was that the system that's working on the River Aire in Scotland would probably be sort of, you know, a better system where they're inspecting and enforcing existing regulations, and that's led to better relationships with farmers and better compliance. And so I think it is this this issue of consultation, because there are sort of various options that could be looked at. We've had comments from CPRE Wales, from the Wye Salmon Association, and you know, Save the Wye, lots and lots of different groups who are putting a lot of energy into sort of how we move forward on this really crucial area. So I do think, you know, again, the issue of whether this is this a Herefordshire Council decision, or is this the Phosphate Commission decision, and there isn't a lot of evidence about the work of the Phosphate Commission, and that makes it more difficult to come up with a balanced decision about this. And one of the other issues that is key to this is the amount of finance and time that would cost in developing a phosphate trading scheme. And, you know, is this one of the things where we spend a lot of money looking into it and then go, well, we've invested this in this scheme already, so now we need to draw down sort of millions more because that's what we need to kind of proceed with this. I think there are a lot of unanswered questions about this, and that's why we shouldn't actually sort of trump transparency and consultation just to sort of get a quick decision through. So ideally, more time would have been spent on this decision, and I think because of that, and on consultation around this. So I think because of that, the Greens can't actually support that. And while obviously we support the you know, coalition's work on this, and we know a lot of work is going into this, we just feel that at this point we're not quite sort of hitting the mark here. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fagan. Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Leader. Well, I guess there are a lot of differences of opinion within the Independents for Herefordshire about this and about what is the best approach. Of course, we all want to see our rivers restored to proper health. We want the Commission to make judgments and investigate the best way forward. However, we also feel that the current strategy is not moving fast enough. So it's a difficult one to know exactly what to do. But one thing's for certain, I guess, is that there are more than one reasons for the pollution, and we all want those responsible to be made to take action to prevent the pollution. So on balance, we support this, but we urge everyone involved to look more closely at the other options that other people have suggested. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilding. Councillor Harvey.
Yes, and I'd like to thank group leaders for their comments. As I said in my introduction, I recognise that that there's learning to be had in terms of how this report has been structured and the level of detail that it contains. And I'll certainly be taking those comments away and making sure that we make a better effort next time round, and also that the conversations that it's been difficult to get people in the room for just availability when there are so many interested parties wanting to get involved in shaping what happens on this important subject, that maybe we need to have a more structured timetable of meetings set up so that people can get them spanned into their diaries, and you know, it's going to be easier to have more regular discussion group sessions and involve people in some of the working groups of the Commission. So I take all that away. I think we're all keen and, you know, to see swift progress on this. And I think the frustration that I sense out there, I mean, I share in that, you know, we are at the exploration stage where, you know, I'd love for us to be able to home in on something that we could be confident was a solution and was going to work and was going to work for the Y and was going to work across the English-Welsh sort of national boundary of, you know, different regulatory systems and different legislative systems. And we're just not there yet. And I think it's a case of saying, look, bear with us a little bit longer, and you know, we will get there. But it is, you know, we all want to see that progress, and we'd all rather just be able to snap our fingers and have the river back the way it was when, you know, we swam in it and
Boris drank from it.
Sailed up. Boris drank from it. You know, as children, but we're not there quite yet, and I think we do have to sort of puddle ourselves around in the complexity of the options a bit longer. So bear with.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. So I'll put a recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. And those against? I think we record those. Thank you. 2 against. Thank you very much.
Anything else for me?
No,
Oh, please, talk more.
Thank you. No, it just says close meeting. I would like to thank everyone for attending. When we close the meeting, once the public are requested to leave the building when reasonably promptly, please assure that you've taken all your personal possessions with you and return your visitor pass as you leave. Could I have confirmation